is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The BBC has been branded jaw-achingly stupid, not by me, by the way, over its decision to cast black and ethnic minority actors in the historical drama of Wolf Hall. Now, is this a forward-thinking idea or nonsense? And are we rewriting history? Henry, I mean, the Tudors were real-life people. They were pretty much white.
Well, some of these shows depart so much from historical context anyway that maybe it doesn't make any difference. But I think just generally we've got a problem in this country with portraying history in its correct sense. You can't change history. And I think it's about the motivation. If the motivation is to to make a political point, then I think it's wrong.
What I find kind of tedious about people finding this instant jaw-droppingly stupid, Jesus was portrayed by somebody who's half Slovak and half Irish. Moses was portrayed in the Exodus by an Englishman. So, you know, same with Anne Boleyn, you know, was portrayed by Natalie Portman, who is Jewish. So if this is the one thing that's getting people angry, then there's something deeper within that rage, because I think Hollywood's been doing that, where people...
When you say something deeper, do you think there is a hidden racism and people are complaining about this?
Well, I think for some, maybe yes. I can't speak for everybody because this news dropped today. I don't know why they are thinking that it's egregious, but there absolutely must be some underlying racism if this is the only one that you're upset about.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Morning, 9:30 on Wednesday, the 20th of November. This is live across the UK, Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So, very good morning. The rural reaction to yesterday. Around 15,000 farmers came to Westminster to protest against the changes to inheritance tax. 4 farmers, as the Prime Minister claims that the BBC backs the tax raid.
With all the allowances in place, to pass it on to a child, it's a £3 million threshold. And all of you can check out what that means in terms of the impact. I think the BBC has already done it.
That's the BBC doing the government's work for it. Jeremy Clarkson received a hero's welcome at the protest, but he didn't take too kindly to questions from the corporation.
So it's not about you, it's not about your farm and the fact that you bought a farm to avoid inheritance tax?
Classic BBC then, classic.
And winter fuel payment poverty. The government admits that 100,000 pensioners will be pushed into poverty by 2026. Don't worry, Starmer says, OAPs are better off under Labour.
Children as young as 11 are carrying knives because they feel unsafe, as those with special educational needs are most at risk of serious youth violence.
And the big freeze is starting. Ice is the issue for much of the UK this morning as travel chaos is expected and more cold weather on the way.
And on the very day the government's own risk assessment reveals that 100,000 pensioners will be dragged into poverty by scrapping the winter fuel allowance, the inflation figures come out. It's soared from 1.7% to 2.3%. That's your fuel bills soaring, food bills and the rest.
And I remind you, we could have been in this situation having an election.
We could.
We could have, if Rishi Sunak could have waited until November, we could be in a very different position. Interesting. Right, gbnews.com/your say with your thoughts. First, the very latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you very much. The top story as well. UK inflation jumped last month in part due to rising energy prices. The inflation rate, due to official figures released this morning, hit 2.3% in the year to October. That's an increase from 1.7% in September. Annual gas and electricity bills rose by about £149 last month, but prices are rising much more slowly than in recent years. However, the rate is now back above the Bank of England's 2% target. Treasury Chief Secretary Darren Jones insisted the latest inflation figures were good news, but Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp told GB News everyone will be worse off.
This is not an accident that inflation has jumped up. It's a consequence of what this Labour government has done. And it's particularly galling because in government, we spent quite a long time in the last 2 years battling to get inflation down. There was obviously globally high inflation a couple of years ago. We got it under control, and Labour have made a load of bad decisions in the last few months that are now putting inflation back up. And that means every single one of your viewers, every single one, is paying today higher prices as a result of decisions that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer have made. And actually, you know what? Inflation affects the NHS as well. So the NHS, police forces, schools, they're all going to be paying higher prices as well for the things that they buy to run the NHS. So it's bad for the NHS as well as being bad for you and me and every single one of your viewers.
Sir Keir Starmer has defended his trip to Brazil amid domestic concerns as he insisted there was a direct link between the work he does internationally and the impact back at home. The Prime Minister says it's very important to hold discussions that could trigger money into the economy, having spent the last 2 days at the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro. It comes amid concerns about the impact of budget measures on jobs and farms and changes to the winter fuel payments. The squeeze on winter fuel payments will force 100,000 pensioners into poverty in 2026, according to the government's own estimates. Well, Sir Keir also defended money to support Ukraine, and he said that rising energy bills are a very important domestic reason for being absolutely clear on the issue. And freezing temperatures and snowfall across parts of the UK are causing travel disruption during this morning's rush hour. Yellow weather warnings remain in place following the first snowfall of the season, which caused more than 200 schools to close in England and Wales just yesterday. Forecasters are advising that vehicles could be stranded, power cuts may also occur, and rural areas could be cut off. Temperatures could drop to -12 degrees Celsius in rural parts of Scotland and -7 in rural parts of Wales this evening. Yellow warnings for eastern and northern England and Northern Ireland have come into effect, and a new yellow warning's been issued in parts of western Scotland. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome to Britain's Newsroom. Are you all right there?
Yes.
Do you need to get comfy?
Just rearranging. I have to rearrange Eamon's chair because we're a different shape.
Andrew,
No,
right, are you sat comfortably?
It's because he has it
you
higher
don't look
than
like
me.
you're quite in the right
Or lower.
place. Right, around 15,000 people took to the streets of London yesterday to protest against Rachel Reeves' inheritance tax raid on farmers.
However, the Prime Minister says the BBC has taken the government's side, so that's all right then.
For a typical family wanting to pass on through the family, which is a typical case, completely understood, then with all the allowances in place, to pass it on to a child, it's a £3 million threshold. And all of you can check out what that means in terms of the impact. I think the BBC has already done it.
And what's so interesting about this story, obviously I was there yesterday, if anyone was watching, it was absolutely freezing. It was a dignified, determined crowd. The BBC this morning showed pictures like this, their website, and last night. So it reduced the numbers. It gave the impression that there was hardly anybody there. I mean, look at that. There could have been 50 people at that protest. And when we say they're doing the work of the BBC, they don't...
The work of the government.
Sorry, the work of the government, BBC, thank you. What they're doing is playing this down because, boy, does it look bad for a government when you've got maybe 15,000 people shoulder to shoulder standing outside the windows around Downing Street and Whitehall and booing. And they are booing war. They're not booing oil use, they're booing a government policy, and that must be keeping Keir Starmer awake at night.
Well, it's fine, because the BBC are backing him.
That's what it looks like. It also looks like the government aren't going to back down on this. So, you know, we've got a lot to talk about in relation to this story, because it is not going to go away.
And there were farmers from, weren't you talking to farmer, was I talking to farmer from Carlisle? But, I mean, they came the length and breadth of the land. And if the government say only 500 farms are affected, Why were there 15,000 people there yesterday?
There was a moment yesterday when Jeremy Clarkson was on the stage and he said, put your hand up if you're a family farm.
Yeah.
And put your hand down if you're not going to be affected by this. And not a hand went down. So the idea that this is only going to be 500 farms is clearly for the birds. I'm talking there to Lord Andrew Lloyd Webber, who appeared.
But also, how patronising of the Environment Secretary, Steve Reed, who's a former Lambeth councillor, i.e. an urbanite, to say, do a bit more planning. Get an accountant in to sort of... Don't these people... Do they not understand that farmers spend all year round working flat out to try and make ends meet? Of course some are rich in land, but not many. But
you don't implement a tax regime schedule and then advise people to get advice as to how to avoid paying that tax, because presumably that means you don't need it then. Is that what you mean? None of it makes any sense. And what I can't understand when I'm seeing all the left-wing commentators talk about this, and you realise that some of them are just communists in disguise, and maybe they've always been there, but what they're very comfortable with is the idea that someone who's worked really hard for something over generations can just have it taken away. Yeah. Just take it away. You're going to have to sell it. You're just going to have to sell it.
Or sell part of it.
Or sell part of it. And also, it's about the fact that it will go into the hands of massive landowners, massive investment banks, massive transnational corporations.
Care about the countryside. These people are custodians of the countryside as well. Now, look, one person who was there was the National Farmers Union student and young farming ambassador, who we were delighted joined us on the show the other day, Zoe Legg. Zoe, morning. Zoe, I have to say you made a great impact when you were on the programme the other day. Many people commented who were watching and listening, saying what a wonderful advertisement you are for the farming industry. You were there. That's probably your first demonstration, I imagine, as a young farmer. Do you think you got your message across?
I think so. I think, like you said, the fact that the BBC are trying to play it down. I mean, the initial plan for the protest was to walk around Parliament Square. However, there were too many people. It wasn't physically safe because of the number of farmers who turned out to share their support and their disgruntledness for this tax. I think just that in itself proves how much of an impact this is going to have on everyone. And like you said, I put my hand up. I didn't put my hand down and no one around me did. This is going to affect all of us.
Zoe, what next? Because it appears this morning that the government are not going to budge on this. Do the farmers ramp up the protests and this industrial action maybe might be the next step?
I don't know. I mean, in our blood is to produce food. We want to do it for and just the fact that I also queued outside an articulated lorry to give my free item of food to donate as part of this. We do not want to limit people's access to food. However, I think what the government have underestimated is that although we are resilient as an industry, we are also incredibly stubborn, and we have no intention of standing down on something that is more than just about money. This is our livelihoods. This is what I have grown up for. This is a passion, this is a love, and this is something that means a lot more than just a little bit of or putting the money back into the government. This is our livelihoods. We have no without our farms.
The Netherlands, about a year ago, there were more than 2,000 tractors which protested restrictions on farm emissions. And in France as well, farmers brought Paris to an absolute halt, and Macron had to back down there on his green goals. So there is precedent for leaders of these European countries to listen to farmers, but it might involve ramping up the action in terms of protests.
Yes, I think it might. I mean, we are trying to do this in a way that makes our voice heard without impacting everybody else, because we are aware that those types of implications does affect other people, and we don't want to do that. However, at the end of the day, if they do bring in this tax, it's going to impact society even more so through food prices. I mean, we've seen inflation today. All of that is going to have a massive impact on everyone else. You need food 3 times a day, and it's a fact, I'm afraid.
So just remind us about your background. You're in your final year of studying. You're in a farming family. How long has your family been involved in farming?
So fifth generation, my father's father's father, if you know what I mean. I have every intention of going into farming. My partner has also grown up in a farming background, and we plan to take it on, and we're hoping to diversify it. So again, adding other jobs into the local economy and investing into it. However, that is something that is now hugely at risk. They say, the other thing that I want to add is that they say this whole 7-year planning thing. Well, sadly, I lost my father, and I lost my father suddenly. He went to work on the farm that morning and never came home. So if you're saying that it's this 7-year plan, we live with the very aware feeling that even if, for example, it was passed to me today, there's no guarantee, even though my mother is healthy, that there is those 7 years. That is the beauty and the intangible element of life.
Writing in The Guardian, Zoe, Will Hutton has said, a commentator, that selling part of these farms will allow other younger, new farming families to be created. Is that a possibility?
I mean, there is some element of possibility there, but equally, if we're only selling off, say, for example, we're a 250-acre farm, which is relatively small in terms of profitability for a farm. If we sell off, say, 50 acres, for that person that's coming into farming, that's not a viable size of land to purchase to then become profitable. That is more likely to go into these small holdings of people sort of coming out of the city and maybe looking to find ways of avoiding tax, buying what would be classed as a relatively small area of land to keep ponies and things on. We're going to become a patchwork quilt of tiny areas of land, which actually sort of will reduce our production levels.
Yeah,
but also, Zoe, also breaking up family farms, you're breaking up decades and decades and decades of experience.
Yes, yeah, no, exactly. You are. I mean, it is one of those, I think, I can't remember the exact quote, but one of the speakers yesterday said, we as farmers, we don't own the land, we just look after it for the next generation.
Right.
And when we pass that land, we are also pass on that knowledge. We as farmers are actually very intelligent people. We are always learning, we are reading, we come together, we talk about ideas and we share them and we try new things because we are adaptable. And through the family farm, that is another area. That is the beauty of all the generations together, is that we all have different ideas and we share them.
Yeah. Brilliant, Zoe. Thank you. Young farming ambassador Zoe Legg there.
She's a great advert for farming, isn't she? Steve Reed, the Environment Secretary, who, I might add, talked to the press in the comfort of his Whitehall office, didn't set foot in his £420 wellies near the farmers, did he?
No.
But he was waylaid as he went into Parliament, and he did say to one farmer, can you believe this? You can always leave the farm to your son.
They don't understand people, it seems. They don't understand families. They don't understand. I mean, if you're a farmer this morning going, OK, well, this 7-year thing, I'm going to give you the farm now and hopefully I don't die within 7 years. Because if I don't die, then you won't have to pay inheritance tax. You're forcing families to have, difficult conversations which nobody wants to have, but also, why should that farmer who's worked all his or her life have to sign their farm over, and the potential family conflict that comes with that?
Accountants rubbing their hands with glee.
And lawyers.
And lawyers, of course.
Right. Up next, as temperatures plummet, find out how many pensioners are going to be pushed into poverty after the winter fuel payment cut, according to figures from the... Andrew Pearce?
The government itself.
This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Serving some of the most talked about food in Chelsea, executive head chef of Number 50 Cheney, Ian Smith, has created a range of menus with a hint of the homeland, using the finest British ingredients sourced by trusted suppliers. Ian Smith was head chef at Jason Atherton's Social Eating House and spent time in the kitchens of the Galvin brothers. Ian joins me now to tell more of the story. Tell me about number 50 Cheney.
Yes, so we are a beautiful restaurant down in a corner of Chelsea on the Embankment with an amazing team. And we are really pride ourselves on, being an affordable luxury that people, really are wanting to return to week in, week out.
What's the view from your restaurant?
We can see the Embankment, the Thames, and Albert Bridge, which is very nice.
Very
it's
nice.
actually lit up. Very romantic.
And tell me a little bit about your philosophy. I was talking there about having a touch of the homeland, British food, seasonal food.
Yes. Yeah, I think for me, great cooking is, with simplicity on finest ingredients, cooked with simplicity, and ultimately, there to be enjoyed through... Yeah, sorry.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was going to say, it starts as a young person's business. You went into it very young, didn't you? 15?
Yes. Yeah, so I was 15. I sat in my parents' bedroom, called the Ritz, the Dorchester and Claridge's, and very luckily, a man on the end of the phone, 21 years ago, sent me on to a college course called the Specialised Chef Scholarship. 3 days later, I had a Ritz stamp letter through the post, and off me and my parents went, and luckily I got on the course.
And how old were you when you got your first responsibility, would you say?
I think the biggest responsibility in my career is today. Leading number 50 Cheney.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
(9:49). This is Britain's News on GB News.
So the Department for Work and Pensions has released new figures which show that up to 100,000 additional pensioners could be pushed into poverty due to the winter fuel cuts.
However, the Prime Minister says pensioners are going to be better off under Labour because the state pension will increase next April.
So we're joined by the economist Jonathan Davis. Good morning, Jonathan. There's a couple of big stories. I want to talk to you as well about the inflation figures as well this morning. But first of all, what exactly is the definition of poverty, if you don't mind, if that's within your remit, in terms of the government's explanation of how elderly are going to be poor?
It's not within my remit. I would be surprised if they had a good definition for it. They'll have a definition, but it won't be a good one.
OK, thank you. Sorry, I did caveat that with the fact that might be a little bit outside of your area of expertise.
But it is extraordinary, Jonathan, isn't it, for the government's own advice from the department, which is just a few hundred yards from the Treasury, physically, revealing that the cut in winter fuel, which has been bitterly contested up and down the land, will drive pensioners into poverty, whatever the government's own measure of poverty is. The government's own internal advice is saying that, yet they're still pressing ahead with the policy.
Well, it's another policy to help what's been going on for the last 10 years, let's face it. Interesting, I was watching the farmers' protest in the piece before, and I saw lots of signs for net zero. That's really what it's all about. It's about funding renewables, solar, wind, going against our natural resources, increasing the costs of living for everyone. And if that means cutting the benefits for this or that sector and increasing the money going to their favoured sectors, well, that's what politicians will do, whether you're red or blue. I will point out about the winter fuel allowance. It's defined as a government benefit designed to help older people with their heating bills during the winter months. Well, we're going to have higher heating bills. The price of oil is rising globally, and I believe it will rise for the next couple of years. We're going to have higher and higher inflation. We have just started winter. I was playing tennis last night. My God, it was cold. It was 3 degrees. I could hardly hold my tennis racket. So why they believe this is an appropriate tactic, I cannot imagine. But frankly, the big picture is net zero and funding the things that the politicians like, such as also the NHS. And frankly, the rest of it is tinkering.
And Jonathan, explain to us that there's a bigger hike in inflation than expected. Is most of that due to rising energy costs, bearing in mind the impact of the budget won't have been felt in the current inflation figures?
Let's go back a little bit. From 2020 to 2022, we had a huge rise of inflation because of the rise in price in oil, gas, copper, food, you name it. And indeed, by the end of 2022, in this country, we had the highest inflation in 41 years. Now, in the last 2 years, commodity prices, I've just described them, oil, etc., the things that you take out of the ground or grow, farmers, the price of commodities globally has plummeted. Thus, our inflation rate has also fallen. It doesn't mean that our costs of living or our costs of doing business have fallen, because clearly they haven't. I mean, look at our home energy bills and our business energy bills. They haven't gone down, even though the cost of fuel has gone down a half in the last 2 years, again, to pay for the net zero. But we have seen a rise in inflation announced today, and it is the beginning of a next period, 1 to 2 years, of rising inflation because commodity prices have bottomed and they're starting to rise.
Okay.
So the idea that a budget changed our inflation rate, sorry, it doesn't hold water.
Thank you, Jonathan. Economist Jonathan Davis there. Don't go anywhere. Primary school kids carrying knives. Here's Aidan with your weather.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a cold start out there for all of us, with Arctic winds and some icy patches first thing, so watch out for those. But away from many wintry showers today, there'll be plenty of blue skies, beautiful weather despite the cold across much of the UK. However, with this northerly wind, it's areas that are exposed to the northerly where we'll continue to see showers during the day. So parts of North and Mid Wales, perhaps 1 or 2 spots in the southwest, the North Sea coast, the Irish Sea coast, and northern Scotland, where the snow will really build up, and in some places temperatures will stay below freezing all day, particularly where we've got lying snow. And with clear skies overnight, those temperatures will drop away very quickly once again. Expect for parts of central and northern Scotland temperatures to be at -10 or even lower in places, and we'll see further showers coming through for northern and western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland into northwest England and West Wales. Whether those showers fall as rain, sleet or snow overnight, we're still likely to see some icy patches first thing Thursday, because under any clear skies we will see a widespread frost. So a chilly night to come, and for most it's a clear night, but we will see some cloud building in the south and southwest, and then this feature arriving into the southwest by the start of Thursday, bringing some milder air. So the far southwest seeing 5 or 6 Celsius first thing, but elsewhere we've got the cold still in place and widely a sharp frost to wake up to on Thursday. But the main cause for concern on Thursday is this area of weather across the south and southwest, perhaps fringing into South Wales, and that could bring an awkward mixture of rain, sleet and snow at lower levels, with perhaps some significant lying snow over higher parts such as Dartmoor, even the mountains of South Wales. Elsewhere we keep the crisp sunshine, but it stays very cold.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of
the latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Murray, the A939 is closed each way between Cockbridge and Tomintoul because of snow. On the M62 in West Yorkshire, 2 lanes are closed westbound where someone's broken down between junctions 28 and 27 from Tingley to Gildersham, causing delays. On the M1 in South Yorkshire, there are 2 lanes closed northbound after an accident between junctions 35 and 36 from Rotherham to Barnsley, causing delays. In Greater Manchester, the A56 is closed southbound along Chester Road at Stretford after an accident. The M6 in Staffordshire is closed northbound from junction 14 north of Stafford to 15 at Stoke-on-Trent. Because of a spillage, there are long delays with queues back beyond junction 13 south of Stafford. On the M54 in Shropshire, the westbound exit at junction 5 at Telford's closed because of an accident. On the M27 in Hampshire, there's a lane closed eastbound after an accident between junctions 10 and 11 towards Fareham. And in Cornwall, the A30 is closed eastbound at Bulventor.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win Christmas on Us this year. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
10 a.m. Wednesday, the 20th of November, 2024, live across the UK. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Well, the rural reaction, it just keeps coming. Around 15,000 farmers are in Westminster protesting against changes to inheritance tax for farmers, as the Prime Minister said, well, it's OK, because the BBC backs the government's tax raid.
With all the allowances in place, to pass it on to a child, it's a £3 million threshold. And all of you can check out what that means in terms of the impact. I think the BBC has already done it.
Made a lot of fuss about the fact that it was a £1 million threshold. Anyway, Jeremy Clarkson also received a hero's welcome yesterday at the Westminster protest. He didn't take kindly to this question from the BBC.
So it's not about you, it's not about your farm and the fact that you bought a farm to avoid inheritance tax?
Classic BBC there, classic.
And a shock on inflation, it's up to 2.3% from 1.7%. It's another blow to Rachel Reed's budget. The Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp said this.
It's a huge increase, and I think it's caused by the inflation-busting pay rises that Labour has been handing out to their trade union paymasters.
Winter fuel payment poverty. The government admits that 100,000 pensioners will be pushed into relative poverty in 2026. But don't worry, Starmer says that OAPs are better off under Labour.
Islamophobia has apparently soared after the summer riots as Muslim communities fear for their safety in Britain. We'll look at the reasons for that. More on that to come.
And brace yourself for a big freeze. Ice is the issue for much of the UK this morning. Travel chaos is expected and more cold weather on the way. I don't want the cold weather.
Well, you were out there, but you were out with those farmers yesterday. I mean, you could feel the mood.
I could feel the cold, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
I mean...
But you can't complain to farmers about the cold.
They were amazing, those farmers yesterday. They know how to dress for cold weather. I look like such a city dweller, like such an idiot. Somebody lent me a bobble hat. In fact, I've got it with me because it's still got the label on. I'm going to see if he'll come and pick it up. But listen, get in touch with us this morning, gbnews.com/you're safe. First for the very latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you. The top stories. UK inflation jumped last month in part due to rising energy prices. The inflation rate hit 2.3% in the year to October, an increase from 1.7% in September. Annual gas and electricity bills rose by about £149 last month, but prices are rising much more slowly than in recent years. However, the rate is now back above the Bank of England's 2% target. Treasury Chief Secretary Darren Jones insisted the latest inflation figures were good news. But Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp told GB News everyone will be worse off.
This is not an accident that inflation has jumped up. It's a consequence of what this Labour government has done. And it's particularly galling because in government, we spent quite a long time in the last 2 years battling to get inflation down. There was obviously globally high inflation a couple of years ago. We got it under control, and Labour have made a load of bad decisions in the last few months that are now putting inflation back up. And that means every single one of your viewers, every single one, is paying today higher prices as a result of decisions that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer have made. And actually, you know what? Inflation affects the NHS as well. So the NHS, police forces, schools, they're all going to be paying higher prices as well for the things that they buy to run the NHS. So it's bad for the NHS as well as being bad for you and me and every single one of your viewers.
Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology Peter Kyle told GB News that Labour took the hard decisions in the budget to fix the economy.
Also gave a pay rise to working people via the national living wage. So we want to make sure that working people and everyone around our country can get through these difficult times in the short term whilst we fix the foundations of our economy and make sure we get growth back into it, which is what people need into the long term. Because if we just carried on as we were under the previous administration, the challenges that we faced in an economy with high tax and low growth means that we can't get wages growing, we can't keep inflation down, and we can't get everybody enjoying the very best that the modern life in the 2020s offers.
Sir Keir Starmer has defended his trip to Brazil amid domestic concerns as he insisted there was a direct link between the work he does internationally and the impact back at home. The Prime Minister says it's very important to hold discussions that could trigger money into the economy, having spent the last 2 days at the G20 summit. It comes amid concerns about the impact of budget measures on jobs and farms and changes to the winter fuel payment. The squeeze on winter fuel payments will force 100,000 pensioners into poverty in 2026, according to the government's own estimates. Sir Keir Starmer also defended money to support Ukraine and said that rising energy bills are a very important domestic reason for being absolutely clear on the issue. The US is temporarily closing its embassy in Kyiv after receiving what it says is specific information of a potential significant air attack on November 20th. The US Embassy recommends US citizens be prepared to immediately shelter in the event that an air alert is announced. The news comes just days after US President Joe Biden announced it would allow US-made weapons to be fired into Russia. Moscow said yesterday that Ukraine had hit Russia with 6 long-range missiles supplied by the US. Meanwhile, Ukraine's air defence units reportedly tried to repel a Russian air attack in Kyiv early this morning. That's according to the military administration. Witnesses said they heard multiple blasts and what sounded like air defence units in operation. In other news, a 92-year-old man has been charged with murder and rape after a woman was found strangled to death in her own home 57 years ago. Ryland Headley, who's from Ipswich, was arrested yesterday morning in connection with the killing of 75-year-old Louisa Dunn, who was found dead by a neighbour in the eastern area of Bristol in 1967. Avon and Somerset Police said Headley was charged overnight and will appear at Bristol Magistrates Court today. Miss Dunn's cause of death was recorded as strangulation and asphyxiation. Freezing temperatures and snowfall across parts of the UK are causing travel disruption for commuters during this morning's rush hour. Yellow weather warnings remain in place following the first snowfall of the season, which caused more than 200 schools in England and Wales to close yesterday. Forecasters are advising that vehicles could be stranded, power cuts may also occur and rural areas could be cut off. Temperatures could drop to -12 degrees Celsius in rural parts of Scotland and -7 in rural parts of Wales this evening. And world tennis champion Rafa Nadal says he wants to be remembered as a good person and as a kid who achieved more than his dreams. The 38-year-old's career came to a close after Spain were dumped out of the Davis Cup in the quarter-finals by the Netherlands. In an open court ceremony, Nadal thanked his family and team, as well as the thousands of fans draped in Spanish flags who'd travelled to Malaga to cheer him on.
At the end of the day, being honest, a lot of people work hard, a lot of people tries their best every single day, but I am one of these that I have been very lucky that the life gave me the opportunity to live unforgettable experiences because of tennis. No? So I just want to be remembered as a good person and a kid that followed their dreams and achieved more than what I ever dreamed.
And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More news from me in half an hour.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Bev. Right, you've been getting in touch at home. June has said, wouldn't it be lovely if pensioners were treated the same as illegal immigrants? Free food, free accommodation and in the warm. Yes, there are millionaire pensioners, but the threshold is too low. If you worked and paid tax your whole life, you are worse off than if you're on benefits.
And Grant on Farmers says farmers have tried doing it nicely and they've behaved themselves, but it's got them nowhere. I back them if they take French-style action, because it's the only way they'll get the government to do anything at this point. The French farmers have brought that country to a standstill more than once.
They do. Yeah, they have. And
farmers could empty supermarket shelves here.
Yeah, and the Netherlands actually was really impressive. There was 2,000 tractors basically descended on the Netherlands. That was all about emissions restrictions. That wasn't about inheritance tax. Farmers are being told across Europe you can't use certain products and you have to reduce your emissions and therefore you have to produce less, your profit will go down. And it worked. But I don't know where our farmers go next. I'd be very happy to see them, you know, carry on with this action.
Yeah, I mean, they have to decide whether they go far more militant and go on strike effectively. Because if they do go on strike, that means less money in their own pockets. And a lot of them are struggling as it is.
The thing is, if we have empty shelves, I think the tipping point is they'd be worried that they will lose the support of the public, especially in the run up to Christmas, if you can't buy your Brussels sprouts because the shelves are empty. But honestly, from what you see from all the polling, from the crowds yesterday, the people I spoke to in London...
Public's on their side.
Public is on side. They know what's going on.
And just remember, when you're in the supermarket, the greengrocer, try and buy British.
Oh, all the time.
Just do.
Janet says it was lovely to see the farmers waving British flags in London yesterday. We don't very often see the British flag amongst protests in London. Very good point. And Richard said inflation is rapidly increasing. What a surprise. Not. It will be mortgage rates next.
Well, Richard, the mortgage rates are already creeping up. Some have already gone up, and of course, we thought we had an interest rate cut, didn't we, last time? We should have had another interest rate cut before Christmas. It won't happen now.
No, it won't.
Not with inflation going up that much.
No, it won't. And so many people are desperate for that that interest rate cut because that monthly outgoing for mortgages is huge at the moment, and that impacts everything else that you can and can't
also,
spend.
do you think about the cost of government debt has now gone up substantially because of the inflation figure? And there's a letter in the Telegraph or the Times today pointing out the amount of money we pay on servicing the government debt, and they're borrowing even more money, would more than comfortably cover the cost of what they're going to screw farmers for.
It's a Ponzi scheme, and I'm not quite sure how much longer they can keep it going. And Graham says, I'm still convinced that Bill Gates' meeting with Starmer had something to do with this attack on farmers. It was from that point that Labour took a different approach to the farmers.
Yeah, they liked them for the election.
Say again,
Labour liked the farmers for the election. They were all over them like a rash.
Well, Bill Gates was there in 10 Downing Street a few days before the budget. Shamelessly, official photographs released. And as we know, Bill Gates owns more farmland in America than any other company or individual. Right, to recap, We were talking about it. 15,000 people there or thereabouts took to the streets of London yesterday to protest against Labour's inheritance tax raid on farmers.
However, the Prime Minister says it's all OK because the BBC backs the government.
For a typical family wanting to pass on through the family, which is a typical case, completely understood, then with all the allowances in place, to pass it on to a child, it's a £3 million threshold. And all of you can check out what that means in terms of the impact. I think the BBC has already done it.
Nice of the BBC, isn't it, to help you all out because you're too stupid to do your own maths.
But also, what's it doing the government's work for it? Propaganda. It's not propaganda, it's public service broadcast, supposed to be impartial.
That's right.
I don't make a secret of that, I'm not impartial here. People know my views. But people don't pay £169 a year or whatever it is, licence fee for the BBC, doing the government's work.
Let's talk to Kelly Seaton, friend of the show, farmer from Cheshire. Morning, Kelly. Lovely to see you there in a very snowy landscape up in Cheshire. So, reflections, Kelly, the morning after you were there, you were obviously here in London yesterday and you were down there at the protest for some of it when you weren't in the studio with Andrew. So, what do you make of it now? What's the feeling amongst the farmers? Is it going to make a difference? Are they listening?
I think this is just the first step. It doesn't feel like it's going to make a difference, although I do note that Keir doesn't quite sound as confident about his convictions in the clip that you just played. I think they've confused themselves, never mind us. I'm so proud of the whole community and everyone else that came to support all the farmers. And obviously you, Bev, I'm now standing in sympathy with you because I was going to jib and do this from my office, but I thought, no, Bev stood out in the cold all day yesterday. I can stand out for 20 minutes. So we're all very proud. We've not embarrassed ourselves in any way. And I think, if anything, probably increased public support because there was probably a bit of anticipation about what was going to happen yesterday. But, you know, they cleaned up not only every piece of litter, every piece of straw, but also the leaves that were there already. So everyone's done a fantastic job. Obviously, all the food went to the food bank, which was absolutely incredible. I think I heard 3.5 ton van loads went, which, I mean, where else do you see that? The Met Police said if the farmers could organise every protest, then their lives would be a lot easier. So we've done a good job, but this isn't the job that we went out to do. The job we went out to do was to get something changed. We realise I don't think Keir is going to U-turn on this, but if he could just come into this with a bit more realism, then maybe we could accept this a little bit better.
Kelly, I was very struck when I spoke to you yesterday and you said you're a farmer's wife who's had to take a job outside of the farm because the farm will not support your family the way it used to because times are tough.
Yeah.
And that's even before they brought in this inheritance tax hike.
Yeah, exactly. And again, going back to what we mentioned yesterday, if we were more profitable, which again goes back to the whole way the system works, then maybe we could swallow this. But how much more can farmers be asked to swallow? We produce food at very low prices and probably don't cover our cost of production on an awful lot of that. And that was done after World War II, and it was supposed to be done so that it kept food prices cheap for the public. And this inheritance tax, the drive towards net zero and reducing emissions, the government's going to have to make a decision at some point what exactly they want. Do they want us to produce food, or do they want us to plant flowers for the environment and bees and butterflies? We can have both, but that means no more cheap food.
That's the bit that baffles me, Kelly. It's almost the lack of the imagination from Labour of what this looks like in 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Massive corporations are currently buying up land where possible, and they could do something that is nothing related to farming. So they might be creating a product or in the fuel industry. And we'll buy your field and they'll put solar panels on it, and that allows them to offset their carbon footprint, if you like. But that means nobody's growing any food for us. And then what? And so it makes a bit of compound thinking is at play here. Is this just what they're doing? They're not thinking through the implications.
They're certainly not scanning the horizon of what could possibly happen in the future, are they? Because we are in very tumultuous times globally, and as we're reducing our output of food production, we are very much risking the general public's ability to eat. I heard somebody say the other day, which is quite right, a farmer will not go hungry. We've got plenty of food around us. It's the rest of the population, and I think most of the population realise that we want to feed you, and we can overplay that phrase and it loses its meaning. But the point of the matter is, we need to stay in business in order to ensure that the population of this country can survive, come what may. Whatever happens, we need to make sure that we are producing food so that the general population can eat.
Thank you, Kelly. As always, you can go back in the warm now. I'm sure you're much hardier than I am. Kelly Seaton there in Cheshire. They are not scanning the horizon. How diplomatically and beautifully put.
But also, because they're getting farms to do more wildflowers and to call it rewilding, it's because of the drive to net zero.
Yeah.
Which means they're going to plant less food, we're going to grow less food, which means we'll import more food. How does that help net zero?
I don't
ridiculous.
want my chicken from China. It is ridiculous.
Well, it's no logic.
Want to buy beef from New Zealand. It's a joke, but who's going to be brave enough in those meetings? Who is going to be brave enough to say, hang on a minute, I'm not on board with this net zero nonsense? Because that takes absolute backbone. And whether you're in a small company or in a Commons meeting room, that's a very difficult thing to say and stick your head out.
And look, the last lot were bad enough on net zero, but this lot make it want the dash even quicker.
Absolutely obsessed.
They're in a 100-metre sprint, whereas the Tories are probably in a 1,500-metre sprint.
Well, let's see what Trump does, because where Trump goes, hopefully the UK will follow. She says, being not at all partisan.
It's time for our poll of the day, and we are asking this. Is Clarkson right? Should the government back down on the farmers' inheritance tax raid?
We're going to be bringing you the live results throughout the day, so make sure you stay tuned. The final result will be announced later in Martin's show, of course, between 3 and 6, for all of our latest news. And to take part in our poll, gbnews.com/poll.
Now, don't forget this tonight. A world exclusive. Donald Trump's son, Eric, speaks to GB News.
That's right, our colleague Ben Leo has been in snowy Aberdeen in what looks like a beautiful hotel, speaking to the President-elect's offspring, Donald's famous golf course. Let's have a listen.
Days of America being stupid are over. It won't happen. And so I think my father would love nothing better to have a great relationship with the UK. He adores this, this country. Hence the reason he's put hundreds of millions of dollars of his own money into building the greatest property on earth. There's no place in the world he'd rather have a great relationship with. I think he would love to see a great trade deal. I think he'd like to see a trade deal that reciprocated for both parties.
Does the behaviour of Labour activists, Labour MPs, would that stick in your father's mind when it comes to trade deals and tariffs?
Do I think that helps foreign relations? No, I don't think that helps foreign relations.
I can't wait to watch that. That is Eric Trump, Donald's son, and that's going to be on Patrick Christie's show tonight at 9 o'clock, only on GB.
And he is his father's voice.
Yeah.
Here it is.
Well, they're a very tight family, and since these allegations against Donald Trump, he's made the circle around him, the circle of trust, smaller and smaller and smaller. So, his family are often going to be the people speaking for him now.
Up next, our very own Statner and Waldorf are joining us in the studio. You know who they are, Britain's Newsroom, GB News, there they are, Statner and Waldorf, otherwise known as Mike Parry and Stephen Pound.
Pair of Muppets, only on GB News.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Should we talk about Gordon Brown? He's been talking about this child benefit cap, and he's, given speeches about it and feels very, very strongly about it. He says there's twice as many children living in poverty as pensioners in this country, Paula. It's made the front of the Eye, but pretty much that's the only paper taking this up because everything else being dominated by the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Yeah, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I just don't think you should have child upon child if you can't afford it. And I believe anyone in a committed relationship should be able to have one child, definitely. Or maybe even two, but one, definitely. But they want over two. I mean, I just think that's insane. If you're not working, why do you expect taxpayers to pay for 1, 2, not just 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
You've taken the words out of my mouth, and I just think this is really
It's not a radical
natural.
thing,
If
yeah.
you can't afford them, what normal person would have them? Now, Isabel tends not to agree with me on this, but I just don't think the state should be paying for children.
But it's not paying for children, is it? It's just...
Well, it's aiding. It's giving them money taxpayers are paying. And let's not forget, 1 in 3 children are now born to mothers not born in the UK. And we've got an ever-growing benefit bill.
30% of children born in this country, their parents were not born in the UK.
But we have a fertility problem, don't we?
Maybe Starmer and his team are willing to find a compromise or give up a bit of ground on this issue. But it's very rare that Gordon Brown kind of makes a campaigning moment. And that will cause... obviously, this is an issue that, amongst the backbenchers, is difficult for Starmer.
I think, I might be wrong, I have a feeling Nigel Farage and Gordon Brown are on the same page on this issue, which might surprise people. I might be wrong.
Very, very interesting.
So just be clear, what does Brown want? What's he looking for?
He's basically saying that this cap on the child benefit is heinous and basically hurts children.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning, 10:23. Britain's Newsroom, Andrew and Bev. And we've got Statler and Waldorf with us, former Labour MP Stephen Pound and broadcaster Mike Parry.
Why don't you put that hat on to keep
This is Greta Thunberg's hat, isn't it, Ad?
I was given this on the farmers'
throw it on the
protest.
floor.
I was freezing because I dress like a southern...
Yeah, if it is Greta Thunberg's hat, throw it on the floor.
You're from the north, anyway.
You look good in that. Anyway,
no, that is Greta Thunberg's.
This is farmers all over there. One of the lovely farmers gave me this to keep me warm. But I think he was going... I'm not sure whether he was selling them because it's still got the label on. I didn't give him any money for it, so I'm going to just appeal to
The very striking
John.
thing, Mike, about that protest, it was cleaner, Westminster Square, than when they arrived.
I know, it's cleaner afterwards.
Yeah.
They took it all with them.
They took it with them.
Because, of course, they have respect for the environment. They live in the countryside.
Unlike these
and they don't
ghastly
like people
Just Stop Oil people.
And chucking crisp packets on the floor. No, you're absolutely right.
And the food banks were overflowing.
It was unbelievable to see the respect with which, not just the dignity with which they spoke, but on the way there, we had lots of reports in lots of coaches and trains. The way they delivered their argument, to me, was compelling in the sense that these people are intelligent, they've got a balanced argument, they're not nutters, and they're not trying to ram their point of view down your throat.
And they don't mind paying tax. They don't mind paying tax. These are good people who believe in this country. They just don't want to give their farm away, Steve.
Well, I don't think they get a better deal than anyone on this table here. Look, you know, they pay 20% on inheritance tax and we pay 40%. They've got 10 years to pay it interest-free. It's not a bad deal. But for me, the thing that stuck in my throat yesterday, I was down there, was seeing that Ed Davey. I was indeed. Ed Davey, who can jump on up, do bungee jumping, and he also do bandwagon jumping. And standing there trying to pretend he's got this empathy for the farmers. I'm sorry. And I thought Jeremy Clarkson, frankly, made a bit of a fool of himself.
Why?
Because when he was going on about, I can't even use the language he used on the stage, but he was saying that he was incapable of being coherent because he was on codeine and paracetamol. He said he's ripped off his boss names. And then he got into a row with Victoria Derbyshire.
Yeah, he did.
There's such a lot of nonsense about this.
Hang on, he's done more for farming in the last couple of years.
Do you honestly think so?
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. He's made it sexy.
Caleb has.
No, I would say Jeremy Clarkson has suddenly raised the profile of the farmers and what they do. And the other thing I simply don't understand is that even today now, we've got inflation going up. One of the reasons for that is because of the rains in Spain means that food's going up. Don't they understand about food security in this country? We've got to have food security, and that's what farmers farmers give us.
Well, Mike, I used to work for the National Union of Agriculture and Allied Workers years ago, and I've got a lot of mates.
Dig ditches?
Yeah, no, I was working on their Land Worker, which was their monthly newspaper. But look, you know, and I've still got a lot of mates of mine who are farmers. Farmers are worried about four things. Firstly, they get hit bad by Brexit, the loss of subsidies. Secondly, they actually get hit by rural crime. There's not enough police people out there to actually look after. Thirdly, the supermarkets are actually screwing them 6 ways to Christmas because of that. And fourthly, they will get undercut over and over again. And I'm sorry, farmers have got a lot to worry about, but it is the inheritance tax is a minor issue.
No, I tell you why you're wrong, because I went to school with a lot of farmers' sons in Cheshire, and it's the horror of not being able to hand their business on to their children. It's that inherent horror. Some of them are sixth-generation farmers who are going to have their farms taken off them. 70,000 farmers at risk in this country, and the government tried to tell us it's 500.
It's nowhere near 70,000 farmers. Look, the reality is, the reason why this is brought in, because there's a lot of people, like Jeremy Clarkson himself said, I bought a farm to avoid paying inheritance tax. He actually said that.
He did. He said in a Times interview...
In 2021.
He wanted to buy a farm because he wanted a pheasant shoot. And he said he knew that saying he wanted a pheasant shoot would go down so badly with the BBC
do you think
and
he'd
the
worry?
mainstream media
Do you honestly
that he
think...
sort of joke as a joke inside, and I'll pay less inheritance tax. Anybody who's watched that series sees how hard that man worked for so little money when he could just do Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Well, hang on a second. He's monetised that programme, let's be honest, but the lad who does the work is Caleb, who's the real star of that programme.
But it was his idea. It was Jeremy Clarkson's idea. And also, you're absolutely right there, Bev, because he did buy the farm as an investment. I'm certain that that's the case, because his accountant would have told him to do it. But then he started living in the country community, and then he suddenly realised what his neighbours are all about, how hard they work.
Creating jobs.
Creating jobs and keeping the country going. And he suddenly became a farmer.
His neighbour is David Cameron, isn't he?
He suddenly became a farmer.
There's a brilliant interview, actually, that I saw yesterday with Charlie, who is his accountant on the series. You may not have seen it. And he said, the farm now, we started out with when Jeremy Clarkson came along as a small farm. We now have a restaurant, and we have a pub, and we have a shop. And therefore, we have suppliers. We have people who work in our businesses. We have people...
And people going to that area.
So the implications for farms being successful helps the rural community in so many different ways. It's not just
Sorry, that's a lot different to the farmer handing on the farm to his or her children. Look, for me, can I just say, very, very few farmers are small single. One of the reasons you have such a high level of suicide in the farming community, as you do in fishing to a certain extent, partly because of the availability of weapons, but because of the loneliness of it.
That's right, the isolation.
And I think that the Welsh Hill farmers and people who are really, really small farmers deserve special treatment. However, the barley barons who own great swathes of East Anglia, who never visit their farms, should be hit with this.
Why do you accept the Treasury figures of 500 farms when there
Which is ludicrous.
15,000 members of the farm community?
Exactly. Because those figures are... Sorry, Andrew, those figures are based entirely on the number of people who actually paid that level of tax in 2021-22. Those are indisputable facts.
No, I don't agree, because you can do anything with statistics.
Absolutely.
We're talking here about people's lifestyles. We're talking about the heritage of their family.
On the land value, it didn't take into account the
exactly.
value of
I'm sorry.
And property.
Stephen, 40% of all the food in this country comes from Lincolnshire, right? So you've got like thousands of farmers alone in Lincolnshire. This idea only 500. Most farmers work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, just to keep the farm going. They don't even make a profit.
Mike, there's a huge number of farms, massive great farms, are owned by, Qatari welfare funds.
Even more. If the small farms go,
that's what's going to happen, Steve.
I'm sorry, look, we should be targeting this more precisely. I'll give you that. We should be targeting those people who see farming purely as investment, and those people who are small farmers, particularly like the Welsh Hill farmers, we should be protecting them in some way.
You can't really have huge farms.
Let's not give this to Ed Davey and Jeremy Clarkson.
I'm going to read you very briefly, because we're on to press time. Kim Howell, Labour MP, former, you know him very well, he warns this government they're making the same mistake Thatcher made in the mining communities. He said, do not leave the lingering bitterness in our farming community with what they're doing with this inheritance. That's a former colleague of yours, a Welsh Labour.
I know, from Pontypridd, from rural Wales.
Right, Stephen, Mike, thank you so much. We'll be back in the next hour. But
gone already?
With your headlines, that was great.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much. The top stories. UK inflation jumped last month in part due to rising energy prices. The inflation rate hit 2.3% in the year to October, an increase from 1.7% in September. Annual gas and electricity bills rose by about £149 last month, but prices are rising much more slowly than in recent years. However, the rate is now back above the Bank of England's 2% target. Treasury Chief Secretary Darren Jones insisted the latest inflation figures were good news, but Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp told GB News everyone will be worse off.
This is not an accident that inflation has jumped up. It's a consequence of what this Labour government has done. And it's particularly galling because in government, we spent quite a long time in the last 2 years battling to get inflation down. There was obviously globally high inflation a couple of years ago. We got it under control, and Labour have made a load of bad decisions in the last few months that are now putting inflation back up. And that means every single one of your viewers, every single one, is paying today higher prices as a result of decisions that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer have made. And actually, you know what? Inflation affects the NHS as well. So the NHS, police forces, schools, they're all going to be paying higher prices as well for the things that they buy to run the NHS. So it's bad for the NHS as well as being bad for you and me and every single one of your viewers.
Sir Keir Starmer has defended his trip to Brazil amid domestic concerns as he insisted there was a direct link between the work he does internationally and the impact back at home. The Prime Minister says it's very important to hold discussions that could trigger money into the economy, having spent the last 2 days at the G20 summit. It comes amid concerns about the impact of budget measures on jobs and farms and changes to the winter fuel payment. The squeeze on winter fuel payments will force 100,000 pensioners in poverty in 2026, according to the government's own estimates. Sir Keir also defended money to support Ukraine and said that rising energy bills are a very important domestic reason for being absolutely clear on the issue. The British Embassy in Ukraine remains open despite the US shutting its own mission in Kyiv because of a potential significant air attack by Russian President Vladimir Putin's forces. The news comes just days after US President Joe Biden announced it would allow US-made weapons to be fired into Russia. Moscow said yesterday that Ukraine had hit Russia with 6 long-range missiles supplied by the US. The UK government, which is considering its own position on whether to give Kyiv permission to use British-supplied weapons against targets inside Mr. Putin's country, said it was continuing to monitor the situation in Kyiv. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More news from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Up next, we're going to discuss why some British Muslims feel that Islamophobia has soared since the riots this summer. Could that genuinely be the case?
This is Britain's Newsroom, GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a cold start out there for all of us with Arctic winds and some icy patches first thing, so watch out for those. But away from many wintry showers today, there'll be plenty of blue skies, beautiful weather despite the cold across much of the UK. However, with this northerly wind, it's areas that are exposed to the northerly where we'll continue to see showers during the day. So parts of North and Mid Wales, perhaps 1 or 2 spots in the southwest, the North Sea coast, the Irish Sea coast and northern Scotland where the snow will really build up and in some places temperatures will stay below freezing all day, particularly where we've got lying snow. And with clear skies overnight, those temperatures will drop away very quickly once again. Expect for parts of central and northern Scotland, temperatures to be at -10 or even lower in places. And we'll see further showers coming through for northern and western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, into northwest England and West Wales. Whether those showers fall as rain, sleet or snow overnight, we're still likely to see some icy patches first thing Thursday because under any clear skies, we will see a widespread frost. So a chilly night to come, and for most, it's a clear night, but we'll see some cloud building in the south and southwest. And then this feature arriving into the southwest by the start of Thursday, bringing some milder air, so the far southwest seeing 5 or 6 Celsius first thing. But elsewhere, we've got the cold still in place and widely a sharp frost to wake up to on Thursday. But the main cause for concern on Thursday is this area of weather across the south and southwest, perhaps fringing into South Wales, and that could bring an awkward mixture of rain, sleet and snow at lower levels, with perhaps some significant lying snow over higher parts such as Dartmoor, even the mountains of South Wales. Elsewhere, we keep the crisp sunshine, but it stays very cold.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Murray, the A939 is closed each way between Cockbridge and Tomintoul because of snow. On the M62 in Greater Manchester, 2 lanes are closed westbound, where someone's broken down between junctions 19 and 18 towards Sinister Island, causing queues. On the M1 in South Yorkshire, there are 2 lanes closed northbound after an accident between junctions 35 and 36 from Rotherham to Barnsley, causing delays. The M6 in Staffordshire is closed northbound from junction 14 north of Stafford to 15 at Stoke-on-Trent after a truck caught fire, with queues back beyond junction 13 south of Stafford. On the M54 in Shropshire, the westbound exit at junction 5 at Telford's closed after an accident. And in Cornwall, the A30 is closed eastbound from Colliford Lake to the A395 at Kennard's House after an accident, with queues towards there and delays as you divert. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
10:37, this is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Bev.
And we should just thank our viewers and listeners, because we had record figures tuning in yesterday, which I think reflects how angry people are about the way the farming community is being treated by this government.
And can I just say that everybody, the number of people who came up to me yesterday to say, we watch nothing but GB News. Everyone in our village watched GB News, they say, because these are salt-of-the-earth British people, and they love what we talk about. They love domestic issues.
I was up in Whittam on Friday, Priti Patel territory. She was on the march yesterday, and I was at a dinner. Farmer after farmer were in the room, watched GB News, and every single farmer was appalled by what this government is doing. And they say the government is lying about 500 farms only being affected. They say they're just lying.
They do. There's clearly a misunderstanding of the numbers. And the thing is, the farmers they're not traditionally necessarily Conservative voters. No. Remember that. There's a lot of Lib Dem farmers. There's a lot of Labour supporting farmers and Green Party farmers, obviously. So it's an interesting kind of coalition of people, isn't it?
It's a classic where they think they're on a vote winner because they think this is all about class war and landed gentry, in the same way Labour have, I think, completely misread putting the tax on private schools. They're taxing kids' education. They think it's clever. They think it's voter-friendly. I think people are appalled by it. And
there's this sense at the moment, like, what's the point? What am I aspiring for? Do I work hard on my farm to hand it to my kids? Do I work hard to give my kids a private education? What's the point? What is the point? Right, moving on.
So, most Muslims, according to a new poll, feel Islamophobia has increased after those summer riots which were sparked by that awful attack in Southport.
So these are the findings of the charity Tell Mama, which supports victims of Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hate.
So of the Muslims surveyed, 71% felt anti-Muslim hatred and Islamophobia had become more widespread since that unrest in the summer.
Well, 71% is a huge number, isn't it? We're joined now by the former chairman of the Conservative Muslim Forum, Mohammed Amin. Good morning, Mohammed.
Good morning, Bev.
Good morning. In your experience, do those figures sound accurate since the Southport riots? 71% of Muslims now feeling that anti-Muslim hatred has become more widespread.
Well, this poll was carried out by Survation, which is a very reputable polling company. I live a very sort of privileged lifestyle. I'm retired, and I don't experience anti-Muslim hatred or Islamophobia personally. It's years since I last experienced any, but I'm not surprised. If you look at what was in the news media during August, the riots, people who were clearly motivated by anti-Muslim hatred, it's not surprising that Muslims see that in the media and are concerned.
Bit on that, actually, because I think what we saw from the media's representation of those riots is that those people were all described, categorically brushed aside by Keir Starmer as being far-right thugs. That was how those riots were depicted. And I know what you're saying about the fact that maybe the implications being that was anti-Muslim, but I didn't necessarily see it in that way.
They were quite clearly anti-Muslim from what the rioters themselves were saying, what was circulating on social media at that time. These were people who were motivated by racial hatred and by religious hatred.
Possibly frustration as well at the time, though, over what they saw as maybe some people being given preferential treatment in the UK. But when we talk about Islamophobia, how does that manifest itself, would you say, Mohammed? Like, what are these incidents? Is it just names on the street or what?
Well, let me give you the last time I experienced Islamophobia that I can remember. Me and my wife, we went to Hull around about 2005, and my wife wears a hijab, and from a long distance away, several hundred yards, a group of teenagers were basically shouting abuse at us. That's anti-Muslim hatred.
It's ironic, isn't it? Because, Mohammed, this poll comes at a time when people who are of the Jewish community would say anti-Semitism has reached high record levels. Lots of Jewish people, for instance, won't go into central London on a Saturday because of the regular march in support of stopping the war in Gaza.
There has been a big spike in anti-Semitism in the UK after the 7th of October attacks. That is totally clear from the information that's been published by the Community Security Trust. And the perpetrators of that anti-Jewish hatred are both people on the far right and, sadly, also some Muslims. Let's be honest about that.
How do we solve it? It's all very well sitting here saying there's division, Jews hating Muslims, Muslims hating Jews. How do we bring people together?
The way we bring people together is by going and talking. First of all, the greatest levels of racial prejudice and religious prejudice arise where people don't meet people from the opposite community. So our big cities are far more tolerant places than places like the Northeast or Wales, where there are relatively fewer people from ethnic minorities. The second thing we do is by going out and talking to people directly. So I regularly go to schools organised by a charity called Speakers for Schools. And one of the things I'm regularly talking about is Christianity and Islam. And even when I'm not talking explicitly about religion, the pupils can see that I'm a Muslim and often are interested in how my own life has developed in 70 years in the UK.
And is the problem with younger people, or is it old entrenched values in your view, Mohammed?
Again, all these social surveys over decades have shown that levels of prejudice are greatest in the older generation, and the younger generation is increasingly tolerant.
OK, I think we're finished. Thank you so much.
We've got a statement here from a government spokesman, said all communities must feel safe, especially in places of worship, which is why we introduced a protective security for mosque schemes and will continue to work with communities across the government to deliver a new approach to tackling racial and religious hatred.
Right, up next, find out why children as young as 11, that's year 6 pupils, so last year of primary school, are carrying knives.
Really?
This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
We all know that pensioners will freeze to death this winter because of the cruel cut to the winter fuel payment, rising council tax, the energy price cap going up, all of that. Now, instead of looking after them, we appear to have a government that seems to want to make their lives worse. Now, they might not care, but you do. And thanks to you, I have now raised more than £270,000 for Friends of the Elderly. You have raised more than the entire amount they gave away in grants for the most desperate pensioners last year. So amazing effort. Thank you very much. Now, I said I'd do a freezing cold swim to raise awareness for how cold some pensioners will be in their own homes this winter. And on Saturday, I went to Stickle Tarn in the Lake District. I'd like to give a massive thank you to the people who turned up to meet me along the way. I would also like to give a monumental shout out to to the wonderful camera crew. We've got John Clark and Joe Scowen, and our health and safety maestro, known only as the Stag. I come up with these crackpot ideas, but it is down to those wonderful people to make them actually happen. I would also like to give you a little warning. There are aspects of this footage that you will not be able to unsee. I am aware that at times my body resembles a bag of milk. But you know what? If me embarrassing myself helps to raise a bit more money, then so be it. And you can go to justgiving.com/page/Save Our Seniors now to donate.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, 10:47. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
This is really disturbing because a major review has found children as young as 11 years old, primary school children, are carrying knives because they don't feel safe.
So Sir Martin Oliver, Chief Inspector of Ofsted, described spiralling knife crime as blighting the lives of Britain's children, and he's called it a national scandal.
What's going on with our youth? We're joined now by Julie Taylor, a grandmother of a knife crime victim. Her grandson, Liam, was only 19 when he was stabbed to death in 2020, and Julie joins us now. Julie, we have to start by saying we're just so sorry, because 4 years, it must still be as raw and sore now as it was 4 years ago.
Yeah, every day gets worse. It doesn't get easier. Time isn't a healer. I didn't think we would be feeling like we do now, and it's not going to get any better. And it's just so tragic and so heartbreaking and so painful.
Can you tell us what happened to Liam?
Yeah, Liam was a normal 19-year-old lad, been at work all day, went to a very quiet, affluent little village pub. 8 o'clock at night, we were told he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He wasn't. He was out having fun with a couple of his friends. In a 13-second attack, Liam was stabbed fatally 6 times and had 28 separate injuries from 4 individuals, 3 of whom are serving a prison sentence that's called a life sentence, but they'll walk free one day. 1 walks free because he wasn't convicted, and we suffer the life sentence, and we dedicate our lives as bereaved parents, or grandparents in my case, to stop knife crime, because we don't want anyone else to feel what we feel. Nobody would want to walk in our shoes.
It's devastating, Julie, on a family, and honestly, we're so grateful for you talking to us today. I am grateful as the mother of 3 teens and 1 older boy, you know, that this is so important. When you hear headlines like children are carrying knives, and the reason they're carrying them is because they don't feel safe. What's your reaction to that as an assessment?
So I, like most other people, are completely ignorant to knife crime. Unless it affects you, it doesn't affect you, which those that it doesn't affect, I'm so happy for them. But now my whole family's life is obviously completely different. For me, especially because I gave up my job 19, 20 months ago to constantly campaign, raise funds, go to schools, unis, prisons, blah, 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 and just talk. Talking is the main thing, talking and education. So that's all I hear. We carry a knife because we are scared. We think that knife protects us. And it's the mindset of today's youth, and it's accepted by society that this is the normal thing. But of course, it's not normal, is it? You know, and as I said, I go into prisons, and when you speak to the prisoners that are in there for life, for murders, you know, things, they're like, we shouldn't have done it. You know, we're not followed by our family that everyone thinks is their family, their gang members. They're not. They're now left alone. They're doing a sentence because most of them don't want to grass whoever they were with and things like that. And it's just so terrible. You know, it's our children need protecting. These are children. So if you're a parent, I've had a parent of a 15-year-old boy speak to me, and I advised her to search his room, search his bag, stop him going out with the people he's going out with. And I go, oh, but, you know, he's 15, I can't do that to him. Yes, you can. You are a parent. He is your child. He lives in your house. You are there to protect him. You know, it's not down to the police. It's not down to the schools. We've all got to unite and work together. But they are your children, so act like a parent.
I was going to say, one of the things you're campaigning for, Julie, is to have bleed kits, is that right, in places like pubs? What does that mean?
So I personally, with help and funding from very many, there's too many to mention for any people. I always am scared I'll miss somebody out. So a lot of people have given me a lot of money and bought me bags. We've placed about 370 out now. We've had quite a few used, and we've had 4 that would have been fatal if the kits hadn't been on site. Wow. So we're so grateful that they've been out. I've had 11 of my kits, to my knowledge, my kits that I've placed out, have helped 12 people. And that's an awful lot, you know, but
yeah, that is.
We shouldn't need the kits. We've got to prevent, but these are the cures when it does happen, you know.
Julia, people often think about knife crime, and they'll think about gangs and they'll think about inner cities, but knife crime is an epidemic now that's across the country.
It's absolutely everywhere. Nobody is safe in our country anywhere. You know, the place where Liam was murdered is the last place in Essex that I would have thought you'd be murdered. You know, if you'd been in the town, well, you know, you're more likely there. But we're Essex. We're a quiet little county, you know. No, it's absolutely everywhere. Nobody can say they're safe anywhere. You know, it's not just gang members. There's just so much, you know. There's just so much. It's just so accepted. And we need education in schools. We need to constantly talk to our children.
Do you think we also need scanners?
Yes, yes. So something I've funded for lately, and I'm just going to buy the 4th one, is wands for the door staff. So I think every single venue should have a kit, because, you know, the kits are for catastrophic bleeds, and not just for knife crime. There could be so many more. Unfortunately, most of mine have been for knife crime. But I'm thinking, right, we've funded for defibs, we've funded for bleed kits. Now let's keep the knives off the streets. And I'm quite lucky, or at the clubs. So 4 places have already said, yeah, we'll take them.
One of those handheld scanners. It's a good idea, like you say, at the airport. And Julie, your grandmother, you were Liam's grandmother. How is his mum? Presumably that's your daughter.
My daughter, from the day Liam was murdered, because it's nearly 5 years in January, for the first 4.5 years of him being murdered, turned to alcohol, full stop. She was a full-blown alcoholic for 4.5 years. And I mean, she was drunk 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. It was absolutely heartbreaking. In June of this year, something happened and she just clicked. And she hasn't touched alcohol since.
Well,
she is now grieving. She's now grieving the loss of her, because up until June,
Julie, I'm going to let you go, I'm afraid, Julie, but send her our love.
We've run out of
luck
time.
to you, Julie.
Thank you. We've got to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. Here's the weather.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a cold start out there for all of us, with Arctic winds and some icy patches first thing, so watch out for those. But away from many wintry showers today, there'll be plenty of blue skies, beautiful weather despite the cold across much of the UK. However, with this northerly wind, it's areas that are exposed to the northerly where we'll continue to see showers during the day. So parts of North and Mid Wales, perhaps 1 or 2 spots in the southwest, the North Sea coast, the Irish Sea coast, and northern Scotland, where the snow will really build up, and in some places temperatures will stay below freezing all day, particularly where we've got lying snow. And with clear skies overnight, those temperatures will drop away very quickly once again. Expect for parts of central and northern Scotland temperatures to be at -10 or even lower in places, and we'll see further showers coming through for northern and western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland into northwest England and West Wales. Whether those showers fall as rain, sleet or snow overnight, we're still likely to see some icy patches first thing Thursday, because under any clear skies we will see a widespread frost. So a chilly night to come, and for most it's a clear night, but we will see some cloud building in the south and southwest, and then this feature arriving into the southwest by the start of Thursday, bringing some milder air, so the far southwest seeing 5 or 6 Celsius first thing, but elsewhere we've got the cold still in place and widely a sharp frost to wake up to on Thursday. But the main cause for concern on Thursday is this area of weather across the south and southwest, perhaps fringing into South Wales, and that could bring an awkward mixture of rain, sleet and snow at lower levels, with perhaps some significant lying snow over higher parts such as Dartmoor, even the mountains of South Wales. Elsewhere we keep the crisp sunshine, but it stays very cold.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win Christmas on Us this year. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss my big opinion. Mark meets and my take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
11 a.m. on Wednesday, the 20th of November, live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So the royal reaction after yesterday, around 15,000 farmers came to Westminster in the biting cold to protest against the changes to inheritance tax. The Prime Minister claims that the BBC has explained it all for you, so that's all right.
With all the allowances in place, to pass it on to a child, it's a £3 million threshold. And all of you can check out what that means in terms of the impact. I think the BBC has already done it.
Jeremy Clarkson received a hero's welcome at the protest, but he didn't take too kindly to the BBC either.
So it's not about you, it's not about your farm and the fact that you bought a farm to avoid inheritance tax?
Classic BBC there, classic.
And how are the farmers feeling this morning? Well, Dougie Beattie has more.
I've spent the morning with the president of the Ulster Farmers Union, who says that government must engage and, most importantly, trust must be at the front of it.
North Yorkshire amongst the noise of the cows.
We're here at Selby Livestock Auction Market getting reaction from butchers as well as farmers as to the implications of the inheritance tax and what it'll mean to the rural communities.
And the winter fuel payment poverty, the government's very own figures show 100,000 pensioners will be pushed into poverty by the winter fuel being taken from 10 million people.
And inflation has risen. This isn't good news. It's gone to 2.3%. It's up from 1.7% in another blow to Labour's budget. Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp reacted to GB News earlier.
It's a huge increase, and I think it's caused by the inflation-busting pay rises that Labour has been handing out to their trade union paymasters.
Private patients push as we find ourselves in a dental crisis. A new report finds some NHS dentists will accept children on their books, but only if parents sign up for private care at their surgery.
Those inflation
They're
figures,
shockers.
they are shocking this morning. Nobody really saw that coming.
No, they didn't, and that's food and energy.
Yeah.
And energy, and because the energy cap's been lifted, has gone up, and it's going up again in January. On the day that the government admits taking winter fuel off pensioners is going to hurt them and drive them into poverty now, and yet you've got the Prime Minister banging on about pensions are going up next April.
And that dentist story as well, get in touch about that. I think, actually, I've given up on the idea of ever getting an NHS dentist as an adult. I'll just never get one now. So I think a private dentist who says, you can come to us and we will give your children treatments free on the NHS, that's probably no bad thing, is it? What am I missing? gbnews.com/your say. First, the very latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you very much. These are the top stories from the GB Newsroom. UK inflation jumped last month in part due to rising energy prices. The inflation rate hit 2.3% in the year to October, an increase from 1.7% in September. Annual gas and electricity bills rose by about £149 last month, but prices are rising much more slowly than in recent years. However, the rate is now back above the Bank of England's 2% target. Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp told GB News everyone will be worse off.
This is not an accident that inflation has jumped up. It's a consequence of what this Labour government has done. And it's particularly galling because in government, we spent quite a long time in the last 2 years battling to get inflation down. There was obviously globally high inflation a couple of years ago. We got it under control, and Labour have made a load of bad decisions in the last few months that are now putting inflation back up. And that means every single one of your viewers, every single one, is paying today higher prices as a result of decisions that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer have made. And actually, you know what? Inflation affects the NHS as well. So the NHS, police forces, schools, they're all going to be paying higher prices as well for the things that they buy to run the NHS. So it's bad for the NHS as well as being bad for you and me and every single one of your viewers.
Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology Peter Kyle told GB News Labour took the hard decisions in the budget to fix the economy.
Also gave a pay rise to working people via the national living wage. So we want to make sure that the working people and everyone around our country can get through these difficult times in the short term, whilst we fix the foundations of our economy and make sure we get growth back into it, which is what people need into the long term. Because if we just carried on as we were under the previous administration, the challenges that we faced in an economy with high tax and low growth means that we can't get wages growing, we can't keep inflation down, and we can't get everybody enjoying the very best that the modern life in the 2020s offers.
Sir Keir Starmer has defended his trip to Brazil amid domestic concerns as he insisted there was a direct link between the work he does internationally and the impact back at home. The Prime Minister says it's very important to hold discussions that could trigger money into the economy, having spent the last 2 days at the G20 summit. It comes amid concerns about the impact of budget measures on jobs and farms and changes to the winter fuel payment. The squeeze on winter fuel payments will force 100,000 pensioners into poverty in 2026, according to the government's own estimates. Sir Keir Starmer also defended money to support Ukraine, and he said that rising energy bills are a very important domestic reason for being absolutely clear on the issue. The British Embassy in Ukraine remains open despite the US shutting its own mission in Kyiv because of a potential significant air attack by Russian President Vladimir Putin's forces. The news comes just days after US President Joe Biden announced it would allow US-made weapons to be fired into Russia. Moscow said yesterday that Ukraine had hit Russia with 6 long-range missiles supplied by the US. The UK government, which is considering its own position on whether to give Kyiv permission to use British-supplied weapons against targets inside Russia, said it was continuing to monitor the situation in Kyiv. Elsewhere, a 92-year-old man has been charged with murder and rape after a woman was found strangled to death in her own home 57 years ago. Ryland Headley, who's from Ipswich, was arrested yesterday morning in connection with the killing of 75-year-old Louisa Dunn, who was found dead by a neighbour in the eastern area of Bristol in 1967. Avon and Somerset police said Headley was charged overnight and will appear at Magistrates Court in Bristol today. Miss Dunn's cause of death was recorded as strangulation. A report has found that too many children in England, including some as young as 11, are carrying knives because they feel unsafe in their neighbourhoods. The charity, which surveyed 10,000 children aged between 13 and 17, found that 20% of teenagers have been victims of violence in the past 12 months. Inspectorates have suggested serious youth violence is more far-reaching than many adults realise, and it has a wide impact across communities. 1/3 of teenage children reported avoiding areas, whilst around 27% alter their travel routes or avoid public transportation altogether to stay safe. Now, freezing temperatures and snowfall across parts of the UK are causing travel disruption this morning. Yellow weather warnings remain in place following the first snowfall of the season, which caused more than 200 schools in England and Wales to close yesterday. Forecasters are advising that vehicles could be stranded, power cuts may occur and rural areas could be cut off. Temperatures could drop to -12 degrees Celsius in rural parts of Scotland and -7 in rural parts of Wales this evening. Yellow warnings for eastern and northern England and Northern Ireland have come into effect, and a new yellow warning has been issued in parts of western Scotland. And world tennis champion Rafa Nadal says he wants to be remembered as a good person and a kid who achieved more than his dreams in an emotional farewell to tennis in Malaga. The 38-year-old's career came to a close after Spain were dumped out of the Davis Cup in the quarterfinals by the Netherlands. After the match, Nadal thanked his family and team, as well as the thousands of fans draped in Spanish flags who travelled to cheer him on.
At the end of the day, being honest, a lot of people work hard, a lot of people tries their best every single day, but I am one of these that I have been very lucky that the life gave me the opportunity to live unforgettable experiences because of tennis. No? So I just want to be remembered as a good person and a kid that followed their dreams and achieved more than what I ever dreamed.
And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom, 11:10 on a Wednesday wintry morning. Let's see what you've been saying. At home, Molly has said one farmer is too many to lose, never mind this figure of 500.
Even if it was 500, that is too many.
500 is a lot of farms.
That's a lot of food.
That's a lot of acres.
But, of course, the farmers say it's thousands.
Graham said you didn't get nearly 20,000 farmers travelling to London yesterday because it only affects 500 of them. That is so true, Graham. I know they're a collegiate bunch, let's say, and I know that farmers support each other, but if there's only 500 farmers who are going to go down, the rest of them might have gone, you know what, it's a cold day, I've got some sheep to shear or cows to milk or chickens to lay.
Yeah.
You see, I learnt a lot yesterday. I've got no other farming activities. And they wouldn't have come out, but they did. So they obviously all feel really, really strongly about it.
I think what Karina says is interesting too. People should boycott supermarkets and go to their local farm shops or the greengrocers you could go to, Karina, for fruit, veg, meat and dairy products. Support your local farms, because there is no doubt the supermarkets are getting farmers over a barrel, particularly on milk.
When Stephen Pound earlier talked about the list of things affecting farmers, like the fuel poverty, the fuel restrictions, the price of fuel for farmers, the supermarkets, the weather, all of the stuff, and actually rural crime was interesting.
Yeah.
There is so much this government could do if they cared about farmers.
Yeah, rural transport.
It just seems to be the opposite.
And rural poverty has been a fact of life for years and years. People who work on farms are very lowly paid.
Quite.
And farms close. If big consortiums take them over, they'll be paid even less.
Well, so many people yesterday were saying to me, you don't go into this job for money. We do it because we love being in nature. We love producing food. They're a caring, nurturing, kind bunch of people.
Yeah.
And yes, some of them have done really well, and I don't resent them a penny of that. They work in all weathers. And Jazz has said we should ban religion and religious headgear. This is what divides us. This is on these statistics that's saying that over 70% of Muslims say they experience Islamic hate or Islamophobia.
I don't like banning things.
I don't like banning things, but I think she might have a point. I feel personally uncomfortable talking to a woman if she has her face covered.
I can remember when Jack Straw was Home Secretary, he was the Labour MP for Blackburn, and there was a huge row because he told a woman in his constituency surgery, take it off. I've got to see your face. I've got to see your eyes. He was absolutely right.
Well, you wouldn't ask that now, would you?
Imagine the row now.
Yeah, it would.
And he was a Labour Home Secretary. So now this is an interesting question. Do you know, if you're listening on the radio, persevere with us, who this man is? He's at the dispatch box. He's brandishing a pen.
I have no idea.
No.
Should we describe him for our radio viewers?
Bespectacled.
He's a white guy he's like his blow wave the back of that hair, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Brown hair, pretty, a dark blue suit, white shirt,
bland
glasses.
And boring is what you're trying to say.
He's about...
bland and boring.
He's about, what would you say, late 30s, early 40s? Maybe I'm complimenting him there.
He's wagging his pen at a virtually empty House of Commons. This is clearly from some weeks ago, because the man sitting on the front bench is Oliver Dowden, who's no longer a front bencher. He was the Deputy Prime Minister. Hardly a political titan in his time, was he, Oliver Dowden? Anyway, this man is called Alex Burkhart, and he is the shadow chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. And the reason we're telling you about this, he's going to be stepping in for Kemi Badenoch at Prime's Questions today, because the Prime Minister, of course, is out the country on his way back from Rio.
Alex Burkhart. Never heard of him?
Never heard of him.
Well, he's got a big stage today, and you've never even heard of him. And you know everybody in that lot, don't you?
I don't know him.
There's a cookie-cutter Tory, you know who they are.
I mean, I'd vaguely heard of him, but I didn't know what his job was. And if he'd walked into this room now, I'd have said, hello, who are you?
Well, maybe he'll blow us all away. It's worth watching Prime Minister's Question Time, isn't it?
Yeah,
just to see what
he'll be standing in, he'll be taking on Angela Rayner, Deputy Prime Minister. And, of course, it's Catherine Forster stepping in for Chris Hope, who's not with us, because Chris Hope is also with the Prime Minister on his way back from Rio. And, of course, our very own Gloria Piero. So put in your questions to Prime Minister's Questions. My question is going to be very obvious. Who the hell are you, Alex Burkhart?
Can I just also say, what is Keir Starmer doing being away again?
15th trip abroad. Got elected. He became Prime Minister on July the 4th, July the 5th. 15th trip abroad already. We've done the numbers. No Prime Minister has been away so much, so often, so quickly. Is it because he doesn't trust a blithering idiot called David Lammy, who's Foreign Secretary, to strut the world stage?
It's
Is that why he does it?
He's a massive globalist, and that's all he seems to be bothered about. Right, back to farmers. We're joined by GBNews reporter Anna Riley. Good morning, Anna. It was a little noisy when we came to you earlier. Oh, it's still quite noisy. Tell us where you are.
Good morning to you both. Well, I'm at Selby Livestock Auction Market. Currently behind us, the auction is going on. It's bulls that are currently being sold. So farmers from all across Yorkshire, some from Lancashire as well, come here to sell their pigs, to sell their sheep and to sell their cows. And butchers come to buy them, and also large supermarkets as well. So obviously what's happening in the farming community is going to have a big impact, knock on, to people like butchers, to people like these auction markets that hold these livestock sales every week. And I'm here now with Reverend Caroline Comastone. She is the chaplain here. Caroline, just tell me what farmers have been telling you, and after the march yesterday, what's next?
The farmers are frightened. They're frightened for their future. The thing they worry most about is food security, because we do not grow enough of our own food in this country. They're hoping that after the march yesterday, which was huge, that somebody will take notice of them.
And you really see the mental health impact on farmers, don't you?
Absolutely. My function here is to listen, which is what I do. And people talk about all sorts of things because they don't see a doctor. They work 365 days a year and very often have no time off. There's no one to help them. And these are generational farms. Sometimes these are farmers whose children don't want to farm, but their grandchildren do. And that's the problem. What do we do in the middle?
And you're helping families cope with suicides of farmers.
Yeah. 5 suicides in the last 10 to 12 days. It's hard, it's tough, but that's what my function is here as the chaplain to the market.
So tragic. Thank you, Caroline. Reverend Caroline there, just giving us an update of the impact on the farming community.
Thank you, Anna. How extraordinary. 5 suicides from farmers in the last 10 to 12 days.
It can be, it is not uncommon, suicide in that instance, but that is a lot. And is this being brought on by fears over the
Doesn't take a great leap of the imagination to realise how anxiety-making this is for farmers. OK, let's talk now to GBNews Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie. Doogie loves a farmer, don't you, Doogie? And you're standing in a picturesque field there.
Well, farming was my bread and butter for years, and I can assure you, if there was money in it, I'd still be doing it. But I mean, the lack of information coming from the Labour government on this is quite astounding. I mean, I just away from an interview with the Ulster Farmers Union president, who came back from London last night, and he is quite clearly stating that they must engage, the Labour government must engage with farmers for a number of reasons. Number one, if they don't engage, you will see that militants will rise, and then it'll be harder to negotiate with a splintered group. But most importantly in this, the farmers now need to be reassured of trust. Farming is done on trust, and they were assured by Keir Starmer at that NAFU conference, they were assured by others that this would not happen. And people around the country don't seem to quite understand how much it will affect their own pocket. If we look at France, France was hit with inheritance tax in their farms. Their farms then split into smaller and smaller farms and then didn't become as productive. We've seen yesterday that they were protesting about Brazilian beef coming into France because they can't compete, because they are too small. Each farm is too small to compete at that level. And Brazilian beef is $3 a kilo cheaper than French beef. So if we start to do that across the UK, we will destroy our farms. I've also heard it said that they can give it away 7 years in advance. That is also a misunderstanding of how farms work, because inheritance tax will mean that when you go to get a loan off the banks, 94% of the banks in our farms in Britain operate an overdraft situation, and you need that for security to go to the bank to get that overdraft. If you send it away, you cannot get that security on nothing. If you or I walked into a bank and asked for £100,000 loans, it wouldn't come our way. But most importantly, and the thing to really watch here, is the planning reform that she talked about in this budget. And I have been told that the rumour is coming through that in this planning reform will be CPO, compulsory purchase orders, where the government can go in and purchase that land and change the usage of that land. That means if a farmer cannot pay that death duties, well, who's going to value his land? And lastly on this, I must say, they talk about they have 10 years to pay this back with interest free. £500,000 over 10 years is £1,000 a week. And what happens if the first farmer dies and the second farmer is still paying his father's? When he dies, the grandson will have to pay £750,000 back to a taxman. It cannot work.
No, you're so right. I agree, Dougie Beattie there in Northern Ireland. It makes me angry in my tummy listening to that. I have a physical response listening to the way he's playing that out there. It's communists are walking amongst us. Maybe they always did.
And Dougie makes the point how difficult farming is. That's why he's not in it now.
Yeah. Right, it's our poll of the day time. We're asking, is Jeremy Clarkson right? Should the government back down on the farmers' inheritance tax raid?
I've got a prediction.
I know.
It's going to be a pretty overwhelming yes.
I don't think you need to be psychic.
We'll give you the live results throughout the day. Do stay tuned. The result, of course, will be announced in Martin's excellent show later on.
Martin does do an excellent show, 3 till 6. I'm normally pottering around in the kitchen, have it on the radio. It is superb. Don't miss it. Right, for all of our latest polls, news and how to vote, just go to gbnews.com/poll.
Up next, 100,000 pensioners being pushed into poverty after the winter fuel payment cut. And guess who's telling us this? The government that's taking away the winter fuel allowance. Can you believe this? You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Locals in Abingdon in Oxfordshire have signed a petition to keep the name of their local pub, and it's called The Midget. Now, this comes after a university lecturer led an 11-month campaign to change the name of the pub, and the owners, Green King, have caved in. But locals are fighting back, and GB News spoke to one resident, Leanne Thompson, for her thoughts earlier today.
I'm not feeling great about it, to be honest. You know, it's a pub that's been here for a very long time. It's called the Midget after a MG car, and they're changing it to the Roaring Raindrop, which a lot of people are not happy about. We know why they're changing it, but a lady apparently came in who was very upset at the offensive term for the name Midget. But nobody here sees it as an offensive term. You don't see the midget and feel any kind of offence towards that. It's named after a car. If she was to actually come, she might actually know more about it, but apparently she's not even been into the pub. She's just heard about it and broadcasted on social media that she wanted the name changed because it's offensive, which as locals don't feel that way. It's the Midget. It will always be the Midget. And if you look, it's even still on Midget Close. So I don't know if they're going to change it to the Roaring Raindrop Close.
Do you know, you should walk into the Midget now and go, do you serve shorts? And just keep going on the joke. It's named after a car, the MG Midget, that was manufactured in the town of Abingdon for a while. The car was released in 1961. The Boozer was built in 1974, giving huge pride to the area. It wasn't named after midgets, you know, the Snow White and the 7 vertically challenged individuals variety. It's named after a car.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
about 11:25. You're right there, Andrew. You're busy.
Yeah, I want them to talk about stamps.
OK, so we've got Statler and Waldorf with us, former Labour MP Stephen Pound, broadcaster Mike Parry. You don't mind that, you pair of Muppets, do you?
We don't care if you do.
Something inside me dies every time you say it.
I see it just as an envious aside, you know, towards us.
Well, look, we love you. When Andrew stopped reading the paper,
No,
we'll...
I want these boys.
You want to talk about... Oh, I love this story.
This is an extraordinary story in the headline in the Telegraph. If you go to Serbia on a plane and post 100 Christmas cards back to Britain, it's cheaper than if you post 100 Christmas cards here, because the first-class stamp is now £1.65. What a scandal.
Well, what amazes me about this is, firstly, that you can get to Serbia for 33 quid, which apparently I didn't know. But the other thing is that the Royal Mail has said, oh, no, we got some of the cheapest stamps in Europe.
No.
Well, how can... £1.65? And I was actually adding up, you know, you 10, you know, that's almost 16, 100. It's 160 quid.
And that's before you buy a card.
I know. And somebody like you, who probably has to send 1,000 and you probably get 2,000 back. I mean, you know, you're going to be Barasic.
I mean,
it's really appalling.
When you were a kid, a stamp was 4 pence or 5 pence, you know. However, I must say, maybe it's because I'm a terrible snob, if people send me Christmas cards with second-class stamps on them, they're off my Christmas card.
Oh, no way.
Harry.
No, I'm sorry.
What?
I'm sorry.
That is very snobby.
Nobody treats me like a cheapster, and nobody gets a card from me unless it's got a first-class stamp on it. So I will not be treated...
Well, funny enough, I usually get a few Christmas cards every year with no stamps on them, and it's like
then you have to pay for it.
£2 to pay. But they're normally from Tories.
But you probably only get a few Christmas cards anyway, on total.
Well, I do tend to use last year's and put them on the mantelpiece.
So 6 foreign destinations posting 100 cards
Albania,
would be
I believe, isn't
cheaper
it?
than in Britain. You could get a flight to Bulgaria, Portugal, Italy, Germany, Albania and Serbia, and you could send 100 Christmas cards from there, and it would be cheaper than sending them here. 100 cards now, then, Mike. If you send 100 cards, first-class stamp, it's going to cost you £165. That's before you've bought the card.
Well, I always have my cards printed. I get personalised cards, you know.
Has it got a picture of you on it in your underpants and a Father Christmas hat?
No, it has a picture of me in a
Please, I've not had me lunch.
In a blue Santa Claus outfit, because I'm Etonian, OK, and I don't believe I can't send a card with anything red on it.
Right.
And they go to the distinguished, you know, people on my Christmas card list, and I pay £1.65 because I will not be seen as a cheapskate.
Hang on, this is brilliant. Do you do your own photo shoot every year with you in a blue Santa's outfit?
No, I have an artist who mocks up a beautiful picture of me, and you know,
I know. When he said afterwards, I naturally assumed.
No, I mean an artist who looks after my internet stuff and my websites and all that kind of stuff.
But, you know, Andrew, I don't know about you, but I've still got my collection of all the Christmas cards that the Prime Minister's or the Leader of the Opposition has sent to me, including the William Hague one, which was The Lonely Shepherd.
Yes, and he was a very lonely Tory leader.
Indeed he was. But, I mean, Jeremy Corbyn's
Andrew's face, the camera really should be... Andrew's withering expression.
I've had private cards and Prime Ministers in charge.
But my favourite one is
Ed come home.
Was Ed Miliband's one, where he's actually got a leather jacket on and he's on a motorbike.
Oh, God.
I've got a private...
I'll show you next week. It's an amazing one.
I've got a private signed card from Mrs Thatcher, Christmas card.
I might keep that.
I have still got it, and it's wrapped in cellophane. And do you know where I got it? When I worked on the Daily Express, Nick Lloyd was the editor, Sir Nicholas, who spent his life turning the Daily Express into a Bible for the Conservative Party with the sole purpose of getting a knighthood from Mrs Thatcher.
And he got it.
He got it. So the first Christmas he's got it, we're having a few drinks in Nick's office, you know, and he's telling everybody about his knighthood and all that. I saw the card from Mrs Thatcher. We'd all had a few drinks. I took it, put it in my pocket.
Oh, that's so mean.
And took it home. And now I tell everybody...
He's probably still looking for it.
He probably still is.
He's probably still looking.
Maybe we need a Britain's Newsroom Christmas card this year.
Well, I used to get a Christmas card from Gordon Brown. I never got a Christmas card from David Cameron. I got one from Theresa May. Why?
I bet I know somebody who got a Christmas... I bet you got one from Keith Vaz every year. Because he used to have a picture of all the Home Affairs Select Committee with silly hats on.
Yeah.
And he used to send it to all, you know, Britain's leading journalists.
No, I got a writ.
And you,
no,
actually.
What I got from him was a writ.
Yeah.
A writ.
Really?
Because I wrote...
I bet that was quickly withdrawn.
Yes, it was.
Sorry,
It was a rather disappointing piece about him, saying that he was a sleazy old... You know what?
Well, I have to say, history has judged you.
Yes.
Well,
yes. Keith Vaz, the washing machine repairman.
Indeed, Vaseline, they used to call him because he was so...
I got a Christmas card every year from Benazir Bhutto. who was the leader of Pakistan.
Yeah.
Because I sat next to her on the plane that took her back to Pakistan when she regained power, and we landed in... I can't remember which city
after they hanged her father.
And there were 1 million people on the ground. But I got the seat next to her as we were flying in. You know,
Amazing. Do you send her a Christmas card? Is she dead now?
Yeah, she was
I'm
murdered.
afraid she got assassinated by her own security guards.
I had tea with her in the Ritz. She was very nice, very attractive woman.
She was
president of the Oxford Union.
Right, well, that was anecdote hour with Stephen.
She was at Oxford, Theresa May.
So,
yes, that's right. Yeah.
Children, please.
We've got to move on. Thank you both. Right, up next, we're talking about the dental crisis sweeping Britain. Some patients are being roped into paying for private care, but the dentist will do your kids for free. Anything wrong with that? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It certainly was a cold start this morning. We're expecting further cold weather on the way with wintry showers, though for many of us we're actually going to see lots of fine weather, lots of sunshine, though it is going to be feeling cold. That's all thanks to this cold northerly flow that's currently stretching across the country, bringing in those wintry showers, particularly across parts of Scotland. Plenty of snow and sleet showers here, and just feeding into northern exposed coasts. Northern coast of East Anglia too could catch these, but generally any exposed coast could catch these wintry flurries. But inland, many of us are going to see plenty of sunny spells, though it is going to be feeling cold. Highs of only around 5 or 6 degrees in southern parts of the country. Now, we do have some snow and ice warnings issued for the Met Office for the overnight period. For parts of Scotland, for example, we're still expecting those snow showers to feed into northern coast, feeding through into inland areas too. But even where we don't see the showers and we see clear spells, it is going to be turning cold with some frost and plenty of icy stretches. Still a few showers feeding around exposed coasts, but plenty of clear spells as we head into the overnight period. And that does mean it's going to be turning particularly cold as soon as the sun goes down, with frost and some ice patches in places, so do take care. A change on the way there across the southwest as we see outbreaks of rain move into parts of Devon and Cornwall. This could be heavy at times and once again could fall as sleet and snow, mainly above high ground. But a cold night on offer, and once again do take care as it could be frosty and icy to start the day on Thursday. So those showers continuing across parts of Scotland, still falling as sleet and snow, but we do have outbreaks of rain feeding in across the south, once again falling as sleet and snow mainly above high ground. But across the central slice of the UK, once again plenty of sunshine to go around, but it is going to be feeling cold with highs of around 5 Celsius. Bye for now.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel. Good morning. The top story. Some breaking news this hour that 2 Metropolitan Police officers are under criminal investigation for potential driving offences after a heavily pregnant woman and her baby died following a collision with an unmarked police car in south-east London last month. That is according to the Independent Office for Police Conduct, and we'll bring you more on this breaking story just as soon as we get it. Elsewhere, UK inflation jumped last month in part due to rising energy prices. The inflation rate hit 2.3% in the year to October, an increase from 1.7% in September. Annual gas and electricity bills rose by about £149 last month, but prices are rising much more slowly than in recent years. However, the rate is now back above the Bank of England's 2% target. Treasury Chief Secretary Darren Jones insisted the latest inflation figures were good news, but Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp told GB News everyone will be worse off.
it's not an accident that inflation has jumped up. It's a consequence of what this Labour government has done, and it's particularly galling because in government we spent quite a long time in the last 2 years battling to get inflation down. There was obviously globally high inflation a couple of years ago. We got it under control, and Labour have made a load of bad decisions in the last few months that are now putting inflation back up. And that means every single one of your viewers, every single one, is paying today higher prices as a result of decisions that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer have made. And actually, you know what? Inflation affects the NHS as well. So the NHS, police forces, schools, they're all going to be paying higher prices as well for the things that they buy to run the NHS. So it's bad for the NHS as well as being bad for you and me and every single one of your viewers.
And the British Embassy in Ukraine remains open despite the US shutting its own mission in Kyiv because of a potential significant air attack by Russian President Vladimir Putin's forces. The news comes just days after US President Joe Biden announced it would allow US-made weapons to be fired into Russia. Moscow said yesterday that Ukraine had hit Russia with 6 long-range missiles supplied by the US. The UK government, which is considering its own position on whether to give Kyiv permission to use British-supplied weapons against targets inside Russia, said it was continuing to monitor the situation in Kyiv. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More news in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
11:36. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Bev.
So this is extraordinary. A new poll shows 1 in 8 parents claim they've only been able to sign up their children to an NHS dentist if they agree to go private themselves.
Healthwatch England have called for action and have said that the conditions being put on parents is a breach of the contract.
So let's talk to the founder of Bespoke Smile, Advanced Dentistry and Academy, Dr Sam Jethwa. Dr Sam, are you holding parents to ransom?
Well, I'm a private dentist, and unfortunately, all the NHS dentists I spoke to today are rammed full seeing patients who weren't able to join us. And I think that's testament to actually what's going on. They are overrun with patients. And I think that the reality is that when you have a certain number of units of dental activity, which is how the NHS dentistry works, for example, a checkup is one or 10 fillings are 3. And it's a complicated system, but essentially it means you have a limit. If you reach that limit, you have to then make a decision if you're providing NHS dentistry of what you do. Do you close up the practice and see nobody? Do you provide all the dentistry for free, which obviously is not possible? Or do you try to limit not running out of the UDAs, which are the units, and take on a minimum number of NHS patients? And it's a problem across the sector. And I think this is sort of actually the other way around, that if patients are being seen as patients of the practice, then the practices are making a decision to help those patients by getting their children on the NHS list.
How many NHS dentists, Sam, are reaching that limit effectively before the end of a 12-month working period?
I wouldn't have the statistics to hand, but speaking anecdotally to NHS dentists, they are running out sooner than they would like to, because there's a limit within a 12-month period. So if you take on anyone and everybody, then you really will run out and are unable to provide care across a series of 12 months. And so that's a problem, especially more in the high needs areas where someone will need a lot of dentistry. They'll run out quite soon, and that means that they have to shut shop. And this is a way of really taking kids dentistry back into primary care. So rather than all the statistics, which I've been on the show talking about kids dentistry in the past, how secondary care is overrun with kids who need extractions. And in the UK, we have one of the highest rates of this, which is a real shame. And if a dentist can do anything in primary care to actually take the pressure off the hospitals, that's a great, great thing. So by being able to see children, hopefully we can just improve the health, dental health of kids going forward in the country.
Can I ask you a personal question, Dr Sam? If somebody came to your surgery, I appreciate you're private, and said, my child is in agony and needs a dentist I can't get into an NHS dentist and I've got no money, would you treat that child?
Yeah, we have I mean, look, it's if you're asking me a personal question, we'd do anything. to help people in that sort of situation. Thankfully, we don't see that very much happening at our practice in our area. We're pretty well stocked with dentists, and we don't have that particular problem in our region. But there are some regions that are essentially just black holes, where there are just no availability, or the dentist that you might need to see on the NHS is miles away, and they could take you on, sure, but do you have the means of getting there? So there's a regional issue as well with this.
Is it because so many of you, though, have taken the decision to say, thanks very much, NHS, but I can make more money and it's less stressful in the private sector? Is that not part of the problem?
So I think that's a myth. Actually, if you look at the earnings, NHS dentists actually do earn the same, if not more, than most private dentists. What private dentistry allows a dentist to do is actually do proper care in the right amount of time. We see generally fewer people, we'll have longer with them, we'll have no constraints in terms of offering the options that we think are best. And actually that's our duty of care, to give our patients all the options. So it allows us to practice really good quality dentistry. The problem is it does mean that the NHS sector is lacking in terms of numbers of dentists and increasing in terms of number of patients. After the pandemic, obviously everything became more stretched, as many dentists took that opportunity to say, you know, this is me done now. I've been in practice 30, 40 years, and I'm going to retire. This is not an environment I'd like to come back to work in. And that's happening across the board. It's not just dentistry. GPs have exactly the same issue. My wife is an NHS GP, and she's suffering the same problems, you know, being able to get patients in. Numbers of doctors are reducing. And I had a patient recently who needed physiotherapy, something totally different, in non-dental, and we were having a discussion about that. 10-month waiting list to get a physio appointment.
Yeah, it's bleak. It is.
So it's the same from everywhere.
All right, thank you so much. The founder of Bespoke Smile Advanced Dentistry and Academy, Dr. Sam Jethwart there. In response to this, an NHS England spokesperson has said, while we know there is a lot more to do to improve access to dentistry service for patients, this should never be an excuse for dentists to require patients to join as private patients for their children to receive NHS dental care. That is completely unacceptable.
And of course, a Department of Health and Social Care spokesman said we inherited a dental sector suffering from years of neglect. We will create 700,000 extra urgent dentistry appointments and reform the dental contract to make NHS work more obedient to dentists. They keep saying that. They've been in nearly 5 months now.
Yeah.
When and how, if there are no dentists to do the work?
Keir Starmer's never here. He's always on an aeroplane.
Not here. Keir, his latest nickname.
Talking of which, who are you? Who are you? That's what the nation will be chanting when they see this guy representing the Conservatives at PMQs. If you're just joining us, we'll tell you who he is in just a minute. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
We'll have to look at...
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
What it's so funny the Times did this story, because I was on the train yesterday trying to do some work and connecting to the Wi-Fi, and it happens all the time. It just doesn't work. It's pathetic. And then I opened the Times and they've done a massive investigation. Loads of different rail routes from north to south.
Was that the James Bond thing, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I think, well, that passenger got through, or almost got through, one episode one James Bond
film.
movie in 8 hours.
But you know, it's interesting. We call it train Wi-Fi, but it isn't. It's just really a SIM card on a train, really. So if your own phone's not going to get signal, why would we assume that the train's going to have signal? It just doesn't work like that. Unless you're in Japan or South Korea, whose infrastructure is infinitely better than ours, you're just not going to get signal. You have to download those films way before you get on
There is technology that can help with that. You know, there really is. If they found ways to put it underground, they can get it on ground and get you going. I definitely think, you know, with the price that we're paying for these tickets, they can get the Wi-Fi going. There is technology.
That's why it's so frustrating, isn't
Call
it?
Elon, get a Starlink. Let's go.
If you're a passenger paying hundreds of pounds for a season ticket or whatever you call it, and you know, commute to work every single day and you're paying all this money and you can't
so
get
expensive.
Wi-Fi.
You'd expect Wi-Fi at the basic, exactly.
But it happens with phone signal as well. I'll be walking down London in Park Lane or somewhere else or down on the south coast. I just don't have phone signal, and I think to myself, what on earth is going on?
Doesn't it feel like 5G's made it worse though?
Yeah.
Because I feel like 4G, that didn't happen so much, but 5G just feels like...
Yeah, and then I always get this little E in the top corner of my phone, and I don't get any signal. I think it's got worse over the past couple of years, yeah, especially with 5G. I agree with that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. So the Department for Work and Pensions has released new figures which show that up to 100,000 additional pensioners could be pushed into poverty due to winter fuel cuts.
This is, of course, they're taking away the winter fuel allowance and 10 million pensioners, but the Prime Minister still says pensioners will be better off under Labour because the state pension will increase in April.
So let's join now by GB News viewer Charles Beckham. Good morning, Charles. We love to talk to our viewers. Now, apparently, being in poverty as a pensioner means that you take home less than 60% of the median income of the country, which I suppose just is, do you feel, ultimately, do you feel wealthy? Do you feel poor? How is life for you when you go to the supermarket now? Is it tough to get what you need in your budget?
Well, it's tough enough. I'm fortunate. I served my country for 22 years, so I have an army pension. I came out in '91 into Mr. John Major's recession, went to university, and I became a physics teacher at secondary schools. So I had a small pension there. I'm still not over the median wage by a while, but I am not in poverty. I don't, shall we say, need the winter fuel payments. I liked having it, obviously, as a pensioner. However, I put it this way. Keir Starmer didn't need to have Lord Ali buy his clothes, but he let him. I have neighbours. I have one neighbour who is only just over the benefits level for income benefits. This is an 80-odd-year-old lady that I keep an eye on with my wife. I know her family, and she is just over the limit. So she's about £3 or £4 a week over the limit. So she can't get it.
This is the pension credit, Charles, which the Prime Minister tells people if they apply for the pension credit, they'll be OK. And, of course, it's a 40-page form, by the way. And there are pensioners who you'll know, Charles, who, even if they're entitled to it, won't claim it because they say they're not taking charity and they're too proud to take it.
Well, I was much the same. That was why I worked for my pensions. I don't see my pension and my state pension as being a benefit. I think I earned them. I think all pensioners. But I don't think the left see it that way. Can I please refer you to one of the lefty lovies, who I will not name, who was on one of your programmes and comes on quite regular, who actually said, when they were talking about the illegal immigrants, let's let all the illegal immigrants in and let's deport all the pensioners because they're a drain on the economy.
Who said that?
I'm not sure anyone would say that on our watch.
They wouldn't get away with it.
Well, I'll tell you what, I won't mention his name here on air, but when we go off air, I'll tell you his name.
OK, super. So, on the whole, I think I probably know the answer to this question before I ask, but how do you think this Labour government are doing for pensioners?
Seriously? They hate the country. They're wrecking the pensioners. They're wrecking the farmers. The only thing I can say is they're wrecking... They just... I can't... It's beyond me. I mean, the Tory government I had no love for by the time they finished. Yes, I did vote for Boris. In fact, I campaigned for my local Tory MP. But they went down the drain. They're all mad on this net zero rubbish and all the rest of it. And they're just out to destroy the country. I think maybe Starmer wants to destroy the country to have the European Union come riding to the rescue. I don't know. If we want to save money, we need Elon Musk to come in and sort out the civil service.
Let me ask you one more cheeky question before we go, Charles. What do you like about GB News as a viewer?
You mean apart from yourself, Bev?
Oh, come on, that's not what I was looking for.
Yes, she was.
I love GB News. I do love GB News. You let the lefty lobbies come on and make themselves look stupid. I think that's brilliant. You bring on some fantastic people. And for instance, I used to, before GB News, Andrew, I used to love you and your friend Kevin on another channel. It was brilliant to hear a decent debate. You don't get that on the other channels.
You certainly don't.
Well, we don't. You don't get the viewers on the other channels as well. Charles, thank you so much. Charles Beckham there, GB News supporter and viewer. Still to come, PMQ's midday.
It's Angela Rayner.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a cold start out there for all of us with Arctic winds and some icy patches first thing, so watch out for those. But away from many wintry showers today, there'll be plenty of blue skies, beautiful weather despite the cold across much of the UK. However, with this northerly wind, it's areas that are exposed to the northerly where we'll continue to see showers during the day. So parts of North and Mid Wales, perhaps one or two spots in the southwest, the North Sea coast, the Irish Sea coast and northern Scotland where the snow will really build up and in some places temperatures will stay below freezing all day, particularly where we've got lying snow. And with clear skies overnight, those temperatures will drop away very quickly once again. Expect for parts of central and northern Scotland, temperatures to be at -10 or even lower in places, and we'll see further showers coming through for northern and western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland into northwest England and West Wales. Whether those showers fall as rain, sleet or snow overnight, we're still likely to see some icy patches first thing Thursday, because under any clear skies we will see a widespread frost. So a chilly night to come, and for most it's a clear night, but we will see some cloud building in the south and southwest, and then this feature arriving into the southwest by the start of Thursday, bringing some milder air. So the far southwest seeing 5 or 6 Celsius first thing, but elsewhere we've got the cold still in place and widely a sharp frost to wake up to on Thursday. But the main cause for concern on Thursday is this area of weather across the south and southwest, perhaps fringing into South Wales, and that could bring an awkward mixture of rain, sleet and snow at lower levels, with perhaps some significant lying snow over higher parts such as Dartmoor, even the mountains of South Wales. Elsewhere we keep the crisp sunshine, but it stays very cold.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win Christmas on Us this year. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive?
Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Wednesday, so we're going to Gloria DePiero and Catherine Forster for Primes' Questions Live.
It is my favourite time of the week because I get to see you two and also to ask our viewers or listeners to be sending in their questions, because it's all about what our viewers and listeners would be asking the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, or indeed the Conservative Party.
Please send your questions for our panel. Send your name, where you're from, to gbnews.com/yoursay. PMQs Live is all about you. Bev and Andrew, what would you like to ask Angela Rayner today if you had a question?
So I go first. So I would ask the guy who's sitting in for Keir Starmer, which kind of is going to bring you on to your question. Thank you. With Keir Starmer being away all the time, how can Keir Starmer justify the fact that he's away all the time when we've got such massive issues in this country and he's on another flipping overseas trip? Make it make sense.
And I would ask Alec Burkhart, who's doing the Tory question today, who the hell are you?
Great questions, great questions. Thank you both. Well, it's fast approaching midday.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel. PMQs Live starts right now. It is 11:57 on Wednesday, the 20th of November. This is PMQs Live on GB News with Gloria DePiero and Catherine Forster.
Well, in just a moment, Deputy Leader Angela Rayner and Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Alex Burkhart, go head-to-head at Deputy Prime Minister's questions. We'll have full coverage of every moment, and we'll be getting reaction from Labour MP for Bassett Law, Joe White, and Shadow Culture Secretary Stuart Andrew.
And just to say, the reason why you're not seeing Sir Keir Starmer today is because, as Bev mentioned, he's flying back from an international summit, and Cammy Badenoch, she didn't appoint a formal deputy leader, so each time she doesn't do it, you'll get a different shadow minister filling in for her. So we've got about a minute and a half before I take you live to the House of Commons. Stuart Andrew, our Conservative spokesperson, welcome. Your first time with us. It's a great pleasure to see you. What would you, or what should your party be asking Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, today?
Oh, my goodness, there's a whole range of things you'd want to ask, being honest, because there's so many big issues that need addressing. But I think certainly we can't ignore the farming issue. You know, the big rally that we had here yesterday, the big protest. I think also the sort of facts overnight that the winter fuel allowance is going to adversely affects so many pensioners. 50,000 immediately will go into poverty, rising to 100,000. So these are big issues that need addressing.
Greedy, 2 questions there.
2 big questions. Jo, what's your response to those big issues?
Yeah, I'm not surprised about the farmers. I had farmers come to see me yesterday. I went out walking amongst the farmers as they lobby Parliament, so there's a huge, huge number. So I was expecting that to be the big issue. Winter fuel allowance, those figures are based on the here and now. Our focus is on rebuilding the economy. We continue to increase pensions, and I think circumstances will be very different as we go into the future.
I mean, you can't just say, it's so tempting, I should say, for opposition to say, no, they shouldn't do that. But actually, they would argue, there's a financial necessity.
Well, I really don't think there is. I mean, the reality is, if you look at this so-called black hole, I mean, half of that was in sort of inflation-busting pay rises. You then see the amount of money that's being invested in GB Energy, for example. We had a plan that was looking at increasing productivity, but also doing welfare changes to make sure that that money was there. Wouldn't have hit those pensioners. And the reality is, the way they've gone about this, I think, is really pretty poor.
Just bear with me now. I'm hoping we can see live coverage of the House of Commons so we know exactly when to take you right there. As if by magic. Right, OK.
There's David Davis. Hopefully not too much longer. But, you know, the weather is getting very cold, isn't it? The weather is freezing and we have these figures out. Did the government really think this through thoroughly? Because they've expended a huge amount of political capital on this, and the farming issues backfiring badly.
We are taking you live to the House of Commons.
I've been asked to reply. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, has attended the G20 summit, strengthening the UK's ties with major economies to drive jobs and security at home. And Mr. Speaker, this week marks 1,000 days of Putin's barbaric war in Ukraine. We will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. And Mr. Speaker, this week also marks Equal Pay Day. I'm extremely proud that this government has introduced the Employment Rights Bill, strengthening the rights of working women and making work pay. And Mr. Speaker, this morning I will have meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in the House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recently met with members of the British Association for Biological Anthropology and Osteoarchaeology, who highlighted a loophole in the Human Tissues Act which allows human remains to be auctioned, frequently disguised as modified items or replicas. This has included a fetal skeleton posed under a glass dome, a human thigh bone turned into a cane, a human jawbone necklace, and the varnished skull of a 6-year-old, often from indigenous communities in Africa and Asia stolen during colonial expeditions. Does the Deputy Prime Minister agree that it is an abhorrent for human remains, regardless of their origin or age, to be sold by auction houses and on social media sites like Instagram, Facebook, eBay, Etsy and Gumtree? And will the government take action to end this depraved practice?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for raising this sensitive issue, and it's absolutely horrifying to hear the account of what my honourable friend mentions, and I absolutely agree that that's abhorrent. And while the Human Tissue Authority strictly regulates the public display of human remains with fines or imprisonment for breaches, it does not cover sales or purchases. However, I will ensure that a meeting is made with the appropriate minister to discuss the troubling cases that she raises.
We now come to Alex Burkhart, the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Very happy to associate myself and this side of the House with the remarks the Right Honourable Lady made about Ukraine. Democracies must stand together. What is the government doing to bring down inflation?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think it's astonishing that, and first of all, can I welcome the Right Honourable Member to his place. And many people might not know, Mr. Speaker, but the Honourable Member was the Minister for Growth when, under Liz Truss, inflation was 11.1% and growth flatlines, so we're doing much better than he did.
Alex
Well, the truth is that actually, thanks to I'd like to thank the Honourable Lady for her standard charm. The truth is, this government isn't doing anything to bring down inflation. This government is stoking inflation. First, we had above-inflation pay rises for the unions. Then, we had a budget which the OBR said would increase inflation.
Order. Sorry. Right, I'm going to hear the question. I suggest we all hear it together, then our constituents can understand the answer as well as the question. Alex Burke.
Very kind, Mr. Speaker. First, we had above-inflation pay rises for the unions.
Yep.
Then we had a budget which the OBR said was going to push up inflation. This morning, we had city economists, real economists, Mr. Speaker, saying that next year inflation would hit 3%. Does the Right Honourable Lady agree that this government's decisions mean higher inflation for working people?
Mr. Speaker, I'll ask the honourable gentleman, 11.1% or 3%?
We've already talked about Ukraine, Mr. Speaker. It was Ukraine and COVID that drove up inflation. This government is doing it to the British people. High tax, high inflation, low growth, low reform. There's a word for that, Mr. Speaker. It's Starmerism. Yesterday, like many honourable members on this side of the House, I spoke to farmers from across the United Kingdom. Some of them families who farmed their land for centuries, elderly men in tears, children worried about their parents, all of them worried that their way of life is about to be destroyed. What would the Right Honourable Lady like to say to them?
Well, first of all, Mr. Speaker, we are absolutely committed to our British farmers, and that's why we've committed £5 billion to the farming budget over the next 2 years. That's the largest ever amount for sustainable food production in the UK, and it's alongside £60 million, Mr. Speaker, to support those affected by extreme wet weather, and over £200 million to tackle disease outbreaks. His party couldn't even get the money out the door for farmers, failing to spend over £300 million on farming budgets. The farmers know they ruined it for them, and that's why we're in government and they're not.
Well, perhaps the Right Honourable Lady thinks that everyone came to London yesterday to thank the government. Let's look at the facts. A typical mid-sized 360-acre family farm in the constituency of my Right Honourable friend for Thirsk and Moulton. They've spoken to their accountant. Their new liability because of this government is £500,000. That's 12 years' worth of profit. When this generation passes away, that farm will become totally unviable, and it's just one of thousands and thousands of similar farms. It's clear the government hasn't got its facts right. The Central Association for Agricultural Valuers, the real experts in this field, say so. The NFU says so. They're shortly to publish a report showing that 75% of all commercial farms will fall above the threshold. If the government isn't going to reverse this terrible policy, will the Right Honourable Lady at least commit that there will be no further increases to inheritance tax and no further reductions to agricultural property relief or business property relief in this Parliament?
Well, Mr. Speaker, he talks about the facts, and I absolutely stand by the figures the government has set out. And the vast majority of estate owners will be totally unaffected. He wants to talk about the figures, Mr. Speaker. I will be crystal clear. The vast majority of estate owners will see no change and pay no tax on land passed on valued at £1 million. Couples can pass on £3 million, Mr. Speaker, tax-free, and those above the thresholds will pay only half the normal rate and can pay over 10 years interest-free.
This is just another part of the budget that's unravelling, Mr. Speaker. Everyone here and all the farmers at home will have heard there was no guarantee there. We know what that means. They're coming back for more. And even if the Honourable Lady had made a promise today, it wouldn't have been worth a fig. We know that the Environment Secretary, before the election, promised the farmers this wouldn't happen. Labour promises get broken. Let's put all of this into context. The Treasury says the family farms tax will raise on average £441 million a year. The Treasury also says that the public sector pay rises the government announced in July will cost £9.4 billion a year. That's over 21 times as much. Why does the government think that above inflation pay rises for the trade unions are worth so...
Order! Now then, I don't need any more from the second bench. Can I just say, please, less of it. We've had a bit of a run-in recently and I don't need to have any more. Right. Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's an audacity for the honourable gentleman to stand there and suggest in some way that Labour broke promises or raised taxes. When I'll school the honourable gentleman, it was his government that raised taxes to the highest level for a generation. It was his government.
Sorry? We'll have less as well, unless you want to go and have a cup of tea. Have we heard any more? Is that it now? Yes or no? Absolutely, you're the one that was mouthing. I can't open my mouth yet. Well, I'm sorry, you must be able to do it like a ventriloquist dummy. Prime Minister.
It was his government that crashed the economy, that saw inflation rise to 1.1% and grow flatline. It was his government that spent the reserves 3 times over. I'll take no lessons from the honourable gentleman.
Alex Burkhardt.
I understand why the Right Honourable Lady doesn't want to answer questions about the terrible choices the government have made. It's because the truth is ugly. The truth is that this is a punishment meted out to people who don't vote Labour. It's the same punishment meted out to parents who send their children to private schools. It's the same punishment meted out to the owners of small businesses terrified about national insurance contributions. And it's the same punishment meted out to pensioners who can't afford to pay their fuel this winter. Isn't it the truth, Mr. Speaker, that if you don't vote Labour, they don't care about you?
There will be more, and it won't be what you want more of. Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, after that display, he clearly didn't recognise the result of the general election. And has learnt nothing. While this government has been fixing the mess that they left, the Conservatives have been desperately trying to rewrite history. They come here every week jumping on a new bandwagon, taking a new pot shot, but absolutely no word on what they'll do differently. Last week, the Leader of the Opposition admitted she supported Labour's plans to invest in NHS, schools and homes. But what they want is all the benefits of the budget, Mr. Speaker, but have no idea how they'll pay for it. Mr. Speaker, the faces may change, but it's the same old Tory party. Straight back to putting everything on the credit card, spending their reserves 3 times over. We took the difficult decisions to fix the £22 billion black hole that they left behind, and while they're reinventing the past, we're investing in the future.
Andy MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In a new report, Human Rights Watch have set out irrefutably how Israeli authorities are committing the war crimes of forcible transfer in Gaza, which amounts to crimes against humanity. Israel's evacuation system fails to ensure civilian safety. Civilians are not provided with access to health, nutrition and shelter, compounded by the banning of UNRWA, with much of Gaza now uninhabitable. Will the government acknowledge that Israel has carried out mass forced displacement in Gaza, and will it take concrete measures on arms trade and Israeli officials in order to comply with its duty to prevent genocide and protect Palestinian lives?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The situation in the Middle East is catastrophic, and I know the whole House is horrified at the terrible loss of civilian life. We are calling at every opportunity for an immediate ceasefire with the release of the hostages and more aid into Gaza. But we do urge Israel to ensure that UNRWA can continue its life-saving work, something the Foreign Secretary has discussed directly with the Israeli Foreign Minister. And we've imposed sanctions in response to appalling incidents of settler violence and suspended export licences for arms following a review that found a clear risk that they may be used to commit or facilitate violations of international law. And we will continue to seek to a two-state solution with a secure Israel, Mr. Speaker, alongside a viable and sovereign Palestine.
Come to Daisy Cooper, the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I associate myself and the Liberal Democrats with the Deputy Prime Minister's remarks on Ukraine. Ahead of the budget, I warned the Deputy Prime Minister that increasing national insurance contributions on social care providers would make the crisis in social care worse. Now, OBR figures suggest that the increase in NICs will cost more to social care providers than the money that the government has announced for that sector in the budget, meaning that that measure alone could withdraw £200 million out of the sector. Will the Deputy Prime Minister speak with the Chancellor to make sure that at the very least health and care providers are protected from taking the hit?
Well, I thank the honourable member for that question, and the Chancellor is sat near me, and I know that through those discussions that we had, that we wanted to ensure that we protected social care. That's why we confirmed £600 million of new grant funding for social care next year, Mr. Speaker, an uplift to local government spending, and an £86 million increase to the Disabled Facilities Grant. Our Employment Rights Bill will help deliver the first ever fair pay agreement for social care sector as well, and we'll also make sure that the NHS is funded to help with the social care situation as well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's clear that the social care providers will be worse off, so I do urge the Deputy Prime Minister and the Chancellor to look again at that. Somebody else who was very worried about the budget is Cathy. Cathy is a farmer in my constituency of St Albans, and she told me yesterday that she thinks the government changes simply do not make sense. The changes mean that her family may have to pay a bill which will force them to sell land, which makes food production unviable. At the same time, the government has not closed the land buying tax loophole that can be exploited by equity firms and the super wealthy. Farmers told me yesterday that they feel like they were betrayed by the Conservatives, and they now feel they were betrayed by the Conservatives. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Farmers told me yesterday that they feel as though they have been betrayed by the Conservatives, but they now feel like they have also been lied to by Labour. Will the Deputy Prime Minister think again on this measure so that our farmers can feed Britain?
Well, again, Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry to hear that Cathy is distressed by what I would say is scaremongering around what the Labour Party is doing. The budget delivered £5 billion for farming over the next 2 years, a record amount. The last government failed to spend £300 million on farmers, and our plan is sensible, fair and proportionate, and protects the smaller estates while fixing public services that they rely on.
Alex Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are only 7 places